Throw it away, Dad. Mom never had any money anyway. That is what my son-in-law Gavin said as he tossed my late wife's passbook into the kitchen trash can right in front of the funeral guests. He wiped his hands on a paper towel as if touching her belongings had contaminated him. I stood there paralyzed, not by the grief of burying Beatrice just hours ago, but by the cold smirk on his face. He looked at me with that pitying arrogance I had come to know so well. The guests looked away, pretending to inspect their shoes, pretending they did not hear him humiliate a 72-year-old man in his own home. I did not scream. I did not fight. I simply walked over, reached into the garbage, and pulled out the blue book with the taped spine. The next morning, I walked into the bank ready to close the account, expecting to find maybe a few $100s for groceries. Instead, the branch manager turned pale, looked at his computer screen, and then at me with trembling hands. "Please stay right here, Mr. Thorne," he whispered, pressing a silent alarm button. "We need to call the police immediately. I thought I was being arrested. I had no idea I was about to start a war. Before I tell you what was in that book and how it destroyed the people who underestimated us, please tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been treated like you were invisible by the people who were supposed to love you. My name is Elijah Thorne, and yesterday I buried the only person who ever truly saw me. Beatrice was not just my wife, she was my spine, my compass, and the only reason I could wake up every morning to face a world that often looked right through men like me. We were married for 48 years. 48 years of packed lunches, shared silence, and the kind of bone-deep tired that comes from working jobs that break your body, but pay just enough to keep the lights on. I worked in logistics, moving crates that weighed more than I did until a steel beam crushed my left leg. In '92, Beatrice cleaned offices, dusting the mahogany desks of men who made more in an hour than she made in a month. We were invisible, the help, the background noise. And apparently to my daughter Maya and her husband Gavin, we were also a charity case. The funeral reception was held at our house, a modest two-bedroom bungalow in a neighborhood that used to be quiet but was now being eaten alive by gentrification. Gavin had insisted on hosting, saying it was the least he could do since he had paid for the casket. He made sure everyone knew it too. Every time a guest offered condolences, Gavin would sigh loudly and say something like, "Well, we wanted to give her a dignified send-off even if Elijah could not afford it." He played the role of the benevolent savior perfectly, holding a glass of scotch that cost more than my monthly medication. I sat in my armchair, the one with the worn velvet upholstery, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee. My leg was throbbing, a dull ache that always flared up when it rained or when I was angry. Today it was both. The house was filled with people, but I felt completely alone. Maya was in the kitchen arranging trays of store-bought sandwiches. She looked exhausted, her eyes rimmed with red, but every time Gavin snapped his fingers she jumped. She was 35 years old, but around him, she shrank back into a frightened child. I wanted to tell her to stand up straight, to tell him to get his own drink. But I had lost that battle years ago. Gavin was a venture capitalist, or a wealth manager, or some other title that meant he moved money around without ever getting his hands dirty. He was tall, loud, and took up all the oxygen in the room. He had never liked me. He tolerated me, like you tolerate a slow internet connection or a stain on a rug. The incident happened when the last guest was leaving. Aunt Sarah, a woman who had known Beatrice since grade school, handed me a small box of Beatrice's personal effects she had collected from the hospital. It was just a comb, half-used tube of lipstick, and that old blue passbook. I held it in my hands, feeling the texture of the tape where Beatrice had fixed the spine years ago. She had carried this book in her purse every day for as long as I could remember. She never let me see inside it, saying it was her rainy day fund, her little secret. I respected that. We came from a generation where you allowed your partner their small mysteries. Gavin walked by collecting empty cups. He saw the book in my hands. "What is that?" "Elijah," he asked, not bothering to look me in the eye. "Just Beatrice's bank book," I mumbled, my voice sounding rusty, unused. "I should probably go down to the bank and see if there is enough to cover the hearse." Gavin let out a sharp, cruel laugh. He snatched the book from my trembling hands before I could tighten my grip. He flipped it open, didn't even look at the pages, and scoffed wildly. "Serious, Elijah. This thing looks like it survived the Depression. Mom was a cleaner. She scrubbed toilets. She didn't have a portfolio." He didn't even check the balance. He just walked to the trash can under the sink, stepped on the pedal, and dropped it in. The thud it made against the plastic liner echoed in the sudden silence of the kitchen. Maya froze, mid-wipe. "Throw it away, Dad," Gavin said, turning his back to me to pour another drink. "It is junk. She never had any money anyway. Stop embarrassing yourself, thinking there is a fortune in there. I paid for the funeral, remember? I am the one keeping this ship afloat." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Maya looked at the trash can, then at me, then at the floor. I waited for her to speak, to say, "That was Mom," to say, "Don't do that." But she said nothing. She just scrubbed the counter harder, erasing a stain that was not there. That silence hurt more than Gavin. His laugh. It was the sound of my daughter choosing her oppressor over her father. I stood up. My bad leg protested, shooting a spike of fire up my hip, but I ignored it. I walked over to the trash can. I did not look at Gavin. I did not look at Maya. I reached down past the coffee grounds and the used napkins, and I retrieved the blue book. I wiped the cover off with my sleeve. I put it in the inside pocket of my black funeral suit. Then I walked out of the kitchen, went into my bedroom, and locked the door. I did not cry. Tears are a luxury for men who have someone to comfort them. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall, listening to Gavin laugh in the other room, talking about his golf swing. The rage started in my chest, a cold, hard knot. It was not a fire. It was ice. It was the realization that to them I was already dead. I was just a ghost, haunting a house they wanted to sell. The next morning, the house was empty. Gavin and Maya had gone back to their condo across town, probably relieved to be away from the smell of old age and grief. I put on my best suit. It was 10 years old and a little tight around the shoulders, but Beatrice had pressed it before she went into the hospital. It still smelled faintly of her lavender starch. I took the bus downtown. I could have driven my old truck, but I wanted the time to think, to prepare myself for the humiliation I expected to find maybe $500 in the account, maybe $1,000. If Beatrice had been incredibly frugal, that would be enough to buy a nice headstone, something permanent, something Gavin could not throw in the trash. The bank was one of those modern glass fortresses that make you feel small just by walking in. The air conditioning was set to Arctic freezing immediately, chilling the sweat on my back. I limped toward the teller line, clutching the passbook like a shield. The security guard near the door gave me a once-over. His eyes lingered on my scuffed shoes and my limp. He put his hand near his belt, not on his gun, but close enough to send a message. I kept my head down. I was used to this. Being a black man of my age in this country means you are always guilty until proven innocent, even when you are just trying to withdraw. Your own wife is money. I finally reached the counter. The teller was a young woman with long acrylic nails and a headset she did not bother to remove. She looked at me with bored impatience. "Can I help you?" she asked, popping her gum. I placed the passbook on the marble counter. "My wife passed away," I said, my voice steady. "I need to close this account and withdraw the balance." She sighed as if I had asked her to solve a calculus problem and picked up the book gently using 2 fingers as if it were dirty. "This is an old format, sir. We do not use these anymore. Do you have her death certificate and your ID?" I slid the documents across the counter. She began typing, her long nails clicking against the keyboard like hail on a tin roof. I watched her face. I expected the eye roll. I expected her to say, "Sir, there is a $12 balance and a $5 closing fee." I was ready to take my $7 and leave. But then she stopped chewing her gum. Her fingers froze over the keys. She squinted at the screen, then leaned closer, pushing her glasses up her nose. She hit a few more keys harder this time, as if she didn't believe what the machine was telling her. The boredom vanished from her face, replaced by something that looked a lot like panic. "Excuse me a moment," she stammered. Her voice had gone up an octave. She didn't wait for my answer. She grabbed the passbook and practically ran toward the glass office at the back of the branch. I stood there alone at the counter. People in line behind me started to shuffle and sigh. A man in a tailored suit checked his watch and groaned loudly. "Great, just great," he muttered loudly enough for me to hear. I felt the heat rising in my neck. I was holding everyone up, the old man with the complicated problem. The nuisance. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles turning ash gray. I just wanted to leave. I wanted to tell them to keep the money. I just wanted to go home and sit in Beatrice's chair. Then the door to the glass office opened. A man walked out, was wearing a 3-piece suit and looked like he cost $1,000 an hour. This was Mr. Henderson, the branch manager. I had seen his picture on the wall. I expected him to ask me to leave, to tell me there was a mistake, but he was walking fast, almost running, and he was looking at me, not with annoyance, but with a terrifying intensity. He was sweating. He ignored the line of impatient customers and came straight to me. "Mr. Thorne," he said, breathless. He extended a hand that was shaking slightly. "Please, come with me into my office right now." I hesitated. "Is there a problem?" I asked. "Is the account overdrawn? Did she owe fees?" Mr. Henderson looked around nervously, lowering his voice. "Mr. Thorne, please. There are people watching. We need to get you off the floor immediately." Then he said the words that made my blood run cold. "We need to call the police. We need to get a secure transport unit here for your protection, for my protection." I looked at the security guard, who was now staring at us confused. I looked at the angry man in the suit behind me, who was now gaping. And then I looked at the passbook in Mr. Henderson's hand. It didn't look like junk anymore. It looked like a bomb. And I had just pulled the pin. I followed him into the office, the heavy glass door ceiling shut behind us, shutting out the noise of the lobby. Mr. Henderson gestured for me to sit in a leather chair that was softer than my bed. He didn't sit behind his desk. He sat on the edge of it, facing me, clutching the passbook. "Mr. Thorne," he said, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "Do you have any idea what your wife was doing for the last 30 years? I shook my head. "No, she was a cleaner. She cleaned offices." Henderson let out a breathless laugh. "A cleaner." "Yes, that is what she told everyone. But in this bank, Beatrice Thorne was a legend. She wasn't just depositing wages. Mr. Thorne, she was investing. She was buying into blue-chip stocks in the 80s when nobody was looking. She was reinvesting dividends. She was buying land rights through a holding company." He turned the computer monitor toward me. My eyes are not what they used to be, but I could see the numbers. They were long, too long. There were commas, 2 commas. I blinked, trying to make sense of the black digits against the white background. "It wasn't hundreds, it wasn't thousands, Mr. Thorne," Henderson said, his voice trembling with reverence. "Your wife didn't leave you a savings account. She left you an empire. And the reason I need to call the police is that the moment this account became active under your name, a flag went up. This kind of liquidity attracts attention, and if anyone knows you are walking around with the access codes to this, you are in grave danger." I sat back in the leather chair. The room spun slightly. I thought about the trash can. I thought about Gavin wiping his hands on the paper towel. I thought about him laughing, calling it junk. And then for the first time since Beatrice died, a smile touched my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who just realized he was holding a loaded gun, and the people who tried to bury him were standing directly in front of the barrel. "Call the police," I said quietly. "Call the chief, and then call a lawyer named Thaddeus Cole. Tell him Elijah is ready to play chess." The flashing blue lights reflected off the glass walls of the bank manager's office, turning the room into a cold, spinning cage. My heart hammered against my ribs, a rhythm I had known since I was a boy growing up on the south side of Chicago. When a black man sees police lights, he does not think of safety, he thinks of survival. I gripped the arms of the leather chair so hard my knuckles turned the color of ash. I thought about Gavin laughing in my kitchen. I thought about Maya turning her back on me. And now I thought about spending my final years in a jail cell accused of fraud simply for trying to claim what was mine. Mr. Henderson, the branch manager, saw the terror in my eyes. He reached out a hand but stopped short of touching me. "Mr. Thorne, please breathe," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "The police are not here for you. They are here for the book." I looked down at the tattered blue passbook lying on his mahogany desk. It looked so small, so insignificant against the polished wood. The tape on the spine was peeling, revealing the cardboard underneath. It smelled of the peppermint candies Beatrice used to keep in her purse. How could something so small require a police escort? Henderson typed a command into his computer, and the heavy steel door of the office clicked unlocked. 2 officers walked in. They were not ordinary beat cops. They wore heavy tactical vests and carried themselves with the seriousness of soldiers guarding a president. One of them nodded to Henderson. "Secure transport is ready, sir." I finally found my voice. It sounded like gravel scraping against concrete. "Am I under arrest?" Henderson looked at me as if I had just asked if the earth was flat. "Mr. Thorne, You are the primary beneficiary of the Beatrice Thorne Blind Trust. The passbook you are holding contains the authorization codes for an account that has been dormant for 12 years, waiting for this exact moment. The balance you saw of $150 was just the annual maintenance fee to keep the ledger active. The real assets are not in this branch. They are held in a secure vault in Switzerland and a holding company in Delaware. This book is the key, and right now walking around with it makes you a walking target. I sank back into the chair. The room felt like it was tilting. Beatrice. My Beatrice. The woman who clipped coupons for canned soup. The woman who darned my socks until they were more thread than wool. The woman who worried about the electric bill every single month. A trust fund. How Henderson saw the confusion on my face, the hurt that was starting to mix with the shock. He sat on the edge of his desk and folded his hands. Mr. Thorne, I have been the manager here for 20 years. I remember the first time your wife came in. She was wearing her gray cleaning uniform, smelling of lemon polish and bleach. She had a crumpled envelope of cash tips from cleaning the executive suites at the downtown brokerage firms. He smiled a genuine sad smile, looking past me into the memory most. People came in here to cash checks and leave. Beatrice came in to listen. She told me once, Mr. Henderson, nobody sees the cleaning lady. I am invisible. I am just part of the furniture. So I listened. She heard the partners talking about mergers before they were public. She heard about tech startups in the 80s when everyone else was laughing at them. She took every dollar she made from scrubbing floors, and she bought what they bought. She didn't buy shoes. She didn't buy jewelry. She bought the future. I closed my eyes and I could see her. Sitting at our kitchen table, counting out change, her hands rough and dry from the chemicals, asking me about my day, never saying a word about hers. She had built a fortress around us, and I never even saw the walls. Why? I whispered. Why didn't she tell me? Henderson sighed, picking up the passbook with reverence. Because she knew the world we live in. Mr. Thorne. She knew that if people knew a black cleaning lady was sitting on a portfolio worth millions, they would try to take it. They would cheat or sue her, or worse, she wanted to protect you. She wanted this to be your safety net when she was gone. But the safety net had a hole in it, a hole the size of my son-in-law. Henderson turned back to his computer screen to finalize the transfer of custody for the book. Suddenly, his face went rigid. The color drained from his cheeks faster than it had when he first saw the account balance. He stopped typing. His hand hovered over the mouse, trembling slightly. What is it? I asked, sensing the shift in the air. The police officers shifted their weight, hands resting near their holsters. Henderson looked at me and his eyes were full of a new kind of fear. Mr. Thorne, we have a problem. A red flag just popped up on the internal legal system. Someone has just filed an emergency motion with the county court. It was filed electronically 30 minutes ago. The system automatically freezes assets when a competency hearing is pending. I felt the cold creeping back up my legs, the phantom pain in my left knee throbbing in time with my pulse. Competency hearing. I repeated the words, tasting like metal in my mouth. Yes, Henderson said, his voice tight. It is a petition for emergency guardianship. The filer claims that you are suffering from advanced dementia and are a danger to yourself and your finances. The petitioner is requesting immediate power of attorney to secure your assets for your own protection. He turned the screen toward me. I didn't need to read the name. I already knew it, but seeing it in black and white made bile rise in my throat. Petitioner Gavin Miller. Relationship to respondent's son-in-law. The room went silent except for the hum of the computer server. Gavin hadn't just thrown me out. He was trying to erase me. He was trying to declare me legally incompetent so he could take control of everything. He must have suspected something, or maybe he just wanted to sell the house quickly and needed me out of the way legally. If this motion goes through, Henderson said, quietly, you won't be able to access the trust. You won't even be able to withdraw $5 for a sandwich. Gavin will have total control over every penny until a judge says otherwise. And with the assets in this trust, he could drain millions before we could stop him. I stood up, ignoring the pain in my leg. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. People were walking by, living their normal lives, oblivious to the war that was happening inside this glass office. Gavin thought I was a senile old man. He thought I was weak. He thought I was alone. He was right about one thing. I was old, But he forgot that I had spent 40 years moving steel with my bare hands. He forgot that I had survived things that would break a man like him in half. I turned back to Henderson and the police officers. My eyes were dry. My hands were steady. "How long do I have?" I asked. Henderson looked at his watch. "Maybe 2 hours before the court order hits our system officially. Once it is in the system, I have to lock you out." I nodded. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old flip phone. The screen was cracked and the battery was held in with tape. I dialed the number I had not called in 10 years. The number of a man I used to play chess with in the park. A man who had been disbarred once for fighting too dirty and then reinstated because he was too good to lose. Thaddeus Cole. "Thaddeus," I said when he answered, his voice raspy from chain smoking. "It is Elijah. I need you to meet me at the First National Bank. Bring your briefcase. And Thaddeus, bring the Black King. We are not playing for fun today. We are playing for blood." I hung up and looked at Henderson. "Print everything I said. Print the transaction history. Print the original trust documents showing Beatrice's signature. And print that petition Gavin just filed. I am going to show my son-in-law exactly what happens when you try to bury a man who is still breathing." The police officer stepped forward. "Sir, we still need to transport the book to the secure facility." I handed him the book. It felt heavy like a brick of gold. "Take it," I said. "Keep it safe, but do not freeze the account yet. I have one withdrawal to make before the judge slams the gavel." Henderson looked nervous. "Mr. Thorne, technically the freeze is pending. I could lose my job." I looked him dead in the eye. "Mr. Henderson, my wife cleaned your floors for 30 years. She made you look good. She never asked for anything. Do this for her, not for me, for Beatrice." Henderson swallowed hard, then nodded once. He typed a command, asking for a manager. Override. "How much would you like to withdraw?" "Mr. Thorne, strictly for legal defense purposes." "Of course." I looked at the zeros on the screen. The numbers that represented Beatrice is sweat and silent sacrifice. "I don't want cash," I said. "I want a cashier, is check. Made out to the firm of Thaddeus Cole. And I want you to pay the retainer for the most aggressive private investigator this city has ever seen. I want to know everything about Gavin Miller. I want to know where he goes, who he sees, and what he owes. Because a man who throws his mother-in-law his life savings in the trash has secrets, and I'm going to find them all, as the printer word to life, spitting out the evidence of my wife is genius and my son-in-law is treachery." I felt a strange calm settle over me. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in my chest. But next to the grief there was something else, something hot and sharp. It was the feeling of a hunt beginning. Gavin had started this war thinking he was fighting a helpless old man. He didn't know he was fighting the ghost of Beatrice Thorne and the husband who loved her enough to burn the world down to protect her legacy. I took the papers Henderson handed me. The game was on. And it was my move. The walk back from the bank felt different than the walk there. An hour ago, I was a grieving widower with a bad leg and an empty wallet. Now, I was a man carrying a nuclear weapon inside his jacket pocket. The weight of the cashier's check and the trust documents pressed against my ribs, warming the spot where my heart was beating. A slow, steady rhythm of revenge. I stopped at the corner store and bought a roll of black electrical tape and a pack of batteries. The cashier asked if I was fixing something. I looked him in the eye and said, "Yes, I am fixing a leak. A very expensive leak." When I got back to the house, the driveway was empty. Gavin is fancy. German sedan was gone, probably at the gym or a power lunch. Maya's car was gone too. They had left the house unlocked, knowing I was just walking around the neighborhood like a stray dog. They didn't think I had anything worth stealing inside, and they certainly didn't think I had the mental capacity to do anything dangerous. It was the first mistake in a long line of mistakes they were about to make. I didn't go through the front door. I went straight to the garage. The garage was my sanctuary. It smelled of old oil sawdust and the peculiar metallic tang of tools that had been used to build a life. Beatrice and I had bought this house 40 years ago, and I had fixed every shingle, every pipe, and every floorboard with my own 2 hands. In the corner sat my red metal toolbox, big as a coffin and twice as heavy. It was covered in grease stains and stickers from my days at the logistics warehouse. Gavin never came in here. He called it the dungeon. He was afraid of getting dirt on his Italian loafers or grease under his manicured fingernails. I opened the bottom drawer of the toolbox, the one that stuck if you didn't hit it just right with the heel of your hand. Inside lay my old wrenches, the heavy steel ones I used to work on the truck underneath a pile of oily rags and a rusted socket set. I placed the plastic envelope containing the bank documents. I wrapped it in a shop towel stained with motor oil and tucked it all the way to the back behind a heavy car jack. Then I closed the drawer. It clanged shut like a prison cell door. Locking away the only leverage I had, I knew it was safe there. Gavin would sooner cut off his own hand than dig through a pile of dirty rags. I walked into the house through the kitchen door, expecting silence. Instead, I heard the sound of furniture being dragged across the hardwood floor. The screech of wood against wood set my teeth on edge. I limped into the hallway and saw them. They must have just returned. Gavin was in his shirt sleeves, sweating slightly, pushing my favorite armchair, the one Beatrice had bought me for my 60th birthday. Toward the hallway closet, Maya was standing by the stairs, holding a stack of my books, looking like she wanted to disappear into the drywall. "What is going on?" I asked, my voice low. Gavin looked up, wiping his forehead. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed, like I had interrupted him, doing me a favor. "Oh, good. You are back," he said, breathless. "We are doing some reorganizing." "Elijah, this house is too cluttered. It is depressing. We need to open up. The space creates better energy or whatever." He shoved the chair again, jamming it against the wall hard enough to scuff the paint. "That chair," I said, pointing with my cane. "That chair stays in the living room. It is where I sit to read the paper." Gavin laughed, a short barking sound. "You can read the paper in the kitchen. The light is better. And besides, we need to clear out the master bedroom." "Maya, tell him." I looked at my daughter. She was hugging my books to her chest, her knuckles white. "She wouldn't meet my eyes, Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Gavin thinks, we think, that maybe it is better if you move downstairs." "Downstairs," I repeated. The word hung in the air, heavy and cold. The downstairs wasn't a finished basement. It was a concrete storage area. It was damp. It smelled of mildew, and the only window was a tiny rectangle near the ceiling that looked out at the dirt of the backyard. It was where we kept the Christmas decorations and the broken lawnmower. "It makes sense." "Elijah," Gavin cut in, stepping forward aggressively, blocking my view of Maya. "The master bedroom has the best light. I need a home office if I am going to manage the estate effectively. You don't need all that space. You just sleep anyway. The basement is quiet. You will have privacy. We are going to put a cot down there and a space heater. You will be fine." A cot, not a bed. A cot. He was moving me from the bedroom I had shared with my wife for 4 decades to a hole in the ground, and he was doing it the day after her funeral. I felt the rage rising again, hot and blinding, but I remembered Thaddeus. His advice? I remembered the Black King on the chessboard. The most dangerous piece is the one your opponent thinks is trapped. I took a breath, holding the anger inside, turning it into fuel. "Okay," I said quietly. "Okay." Gavin blinked, surprised. He had expected a fight. He had expected me to yell so he could call the doctor and say I was agitated, say I was losing my mind, but I just nodded. "Fine. If that is what you think is best, I will move downstairs." Gavin smirked, turning to Maya. "See, I told you he wouldn't care. He knows his place." He clapped his hands together. "Good. Then let's get the rest of this junk out of here." I froze. "Junk? What junk?" I asked. The master bedroom was full of Beatrice's things, her vanity table, her collection of porcelain angels, her clothes. Everything was exactly where she had left it. Gavin walked past me into the master bedroom. I followed him, my limp more pronounced as my leg throbbed in protest. He was standing in front of the open closet. Beatrice's dresses were hanging there. Rainbow of floral prints and sensible wool coats. Gavin reached in and grabbed a handful of hangers. He didn't take them off gently. He yanked them, pulling them down so hard the wire hangers snapped. He threw the dresses onto the floor in a heap. "We need to clear this out today," Gavin said, grabbing another armful. "This smells like old people and mothballs. I can't have clients coming over for meetings with this smell in the house." I stepped forward, my hand gripping my cane so tight the wood creaked hardly loudly. "That is my wife's clothing," I said. my voice dropping to a growl. Those are her things. Put them back. Gavin stopped and turned slowly. He held up a blue dress, the one she wore to church every Easter. He looked at it with disgust, then tossed it onto the pile like it was a dirty rag. Elijah, she is dead. The clothes are useless. No one is going to wear them. Goodwill won't even take this stuff. It is outdated. It is trash. I am doing you a favor, clearing it out so you don't have to look at it. He grabbed a black heavy-duty garbage bag and started stuffing the dresses inside. He shoved the blue dress in, then her winter coat, then the silk scarf she saved for anniversaries. I watched the bag bulge, swallowing the last physical remnants of the woman I loved. Maya stood in the doorway, silent tears streaming down her face, but she didn't move. She didn't say a word. She just watched him erase her mother. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to swing my cane and shatter his jaw. I wanted to make him feel a fraction of the pain he was inflicting on me. But I looked at the ceiling where the smoke detector blinked a slow red eye. I knew what he was doing. He was baiting me. He wanted me to get violent. He wanted a reason to call the police and have me committed. He wanted to show the court that I was dangerous. I took a step back. I forced my hand to relax on the cane. I watched him tie the knot on the black bag. He dragged it through the hallway and out the back door, throwing it into the yard near the rain gutter. It landed in a puddle, splashing mud onto the black plastic. I will call the hauler tomorrow, Gavin said, dusting off his hands. Now go downstairs. Elijah, get your things out of the way. I have a contractor coming in the morning to measure for the new desk. I turned and walked to the basement door. I didn't look at Maya. I couldn't bear to see the shame on her face. I walked down the 12 steep wooden steps, counting them one by one like a countdown. The air down there was cold and damp, seeping into my bones. I sat on an old milk crate surrounded by boxes of holiday ornaments and listened to the footsteps above my head. I could hear Gavin pacing in my bedroom. I could hear him laughing on the phone, probably bragging to his friends about how he had taken over the castle. But he forgot that castles have dungeons, and dungeons have secrets. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the cheap digital voice recorder I had bought at the electronics store, along with the batteries I had also bought. 3 small baby monitors intended for nurseries, but perfect for surveillance. I waited until night fell, until the house was quiet. Then I moved silently up the stairs, ignoring the pain in my leg. I slipped into the vents, the air ducts that ran through the old house. Beatrice and I had cleaned these ducts ourselves 10 years ago. I knew exactly where they went. I placed one monitor behind the vent in the master bedroom, one in the kitchen, and one in the living room. I went back down to the basement and put on the headphones. The sound was crystal clear. I could hear Gavin snoring. I could hear Maya weeping softly in the guest room. But tomorrow I would hear more. Tomorrow I would hear his plans, his schemes, and his secrets. He had put me in the basement thinking he was burying me, but he didn't realize he had just put me in the control room. I put the headphones on the crate and stared up at the ceiling cracks. Go ahead and sleep, Gavin, I whispered to the darkness. Sleep while you can, because the man in the basement is wide awake, and he is listening to every word you say. Living in the basement of the house I built with my own hands was a special kind of torture. The air down there was heavy with moisture and the smell of unwashed concrete. It seeped into my joints, making my bad leg throb with a constant dull rhythm that kept me awake most nights. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the humiliation of listening to the floorboards creak above my head, knowing that strangers were walking freely in the rooms where I had raised my daughter. But I had a job to do. I was not just an old man banished to the cellar. I was a spy behind enemy lines. For the first few days, I thought I was being clever. I would wait until Gavin left for his office in his shiny German sedan and Maya went to her yoga class. Then I would slip out the back door. I would walk 3 blocks to the public library to use the payphone or meet Thaddeus at the diner on 4th Street. We were building a case brick by brick, getting the trust documents certified, securing the affidavits from the bank manager. I thought I was invisible. I thought Gavin was too arrogant to notice the movements of a man he considered debris. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the trap snapped shut. I had just returned from a meeting with Thaddeus, slipping back through the garden gate, trying to look like I had just been out for fresh air. Gavin was waiting for me at the kitchen door, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. He wasn't smiling today. He looked like a school principal waiting for a truant student. "Where have you been, Elijah?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. I gripped my cane tighter. "Just walking," I said, trying to keep the blood moving in this leg. Gavin shook his head slowly, clicking his tongue against his teeth. "You know, Maya worries when you wander off. You are getting forgetful, Dad. You might get lost." He reached out and snatched my old flip phone from my shirt pocket before I could react. "I upgraded you," he said, tossing my phone onto the counter. It bounced and slid toward the sink. "You don't need that piece of junk anymore." He pulled a brand new smartphone from his pocket. It was sleek, expensive, and completely locked down. "I set this up for you. It has a GPS tracker active 24/7. It is for your safety. Dad, if you leave a 2-block radius of this house, I get an alert on my watch. If you stay still for too long, I get an alert. So no more long walks." "Okay, we wouldn't want to have to call the police to find you." He handed me the phone. It felt like a shackle. He had put a digital leash on me. I wanted to throw it through the window. But I remembered the long game. I remembered Thaddeus saying, "Patience is a weapon." So I took the phone and muttered a thank you, behaving exactly like the confused old man he wanted me to be. Gavin patted my shoulder a touch that felt more like a shove and said, "Good. Now go wash up. We have guests coming tonight, and I need you to make yourself useful." Didn't understand what he meant by useful until an hour later, Maya came down to the basement holding a white jacket. It was a server jacket, the kind waiters wear in high-end steakhouses, stiff and humiliatingly formal. "Gavin fired the catering staff," she said, looking at her shoes. "He said it was too late to book anyone else. He wants you to help with the wine." I looked at my daughter, at the shame burning in her cheeks. She knew this was wrong. She knew that asking her 72-year-old father, a man who had broken his back in a steel mill, to put on a uniform and serve her husband as friends was a level of disrespect that bordered on evil. But she was too afraid of losing the lifestyle he provided to say no. I took the jacket. My hands didn't shake. I put it on, buttoning it slowly, watching her eyes fill with tears. She turned and ran back upstairs, unable to look at me. The dinner party was a gathering of sharks. 6 men and women from Gavin, his venture capital firm, sat around my dining table, laughing loudly, drinking wine that cost more than my monthly pension. I stood in the corner holding a bottle of Cabernet, my legs screaming in protest. The guests were young, wealthy, and completely indifferent to the elderly black man standing in the shadows, waiting to refill their glasses. Gavin sat at the head of the table in my chair. Looked like a king holding court, talking about market disruptions and liquidity events, when I moved forward to pour wine for a woman with icy blonde hair. Gavin stopped talking and gestured toward me. "Oh, don't mind Elijah," he said loudly, his voice dripping with false benevolence. "This is my father-in-law. We take care of him. He gets a little confused, sometimes needs structure. So we give him little jobs to make him feel part of the family." "Right, Elijah." The table went quiet. The guests looked at me, then at Gavin, seeing the cruelty beneath the joke. But nobody said anything. They just smiled, polite, tight smiles, and went back to eating their steak. I poured the wine, not spilling a drop. I caught Gavin's eye. He was waiting for me to break. He was waiting for me to throw the bottle, to scream, to prove I was unstable. But I gave him nothing. I was a stone. I was a statue. I finished the round and retreated to the kitchen, the sound of their laughter chasing me like a pack of hyenas. I leaned against the counter, breathing hard. The humiliation burned in my chest, hotter than the pain in my knee. I wanted to leave, to go back to my basement and rip this white jacket into shreds. But then I heard it. The conversation in the dining room had shifted. The clinking of silverware stopped and the tone became serious, hushed. I moved closer to the swinging door, leaving it open just a crack. "So Gavin," one of the men asked, his voice low, businesslike. "The Hudson Project. We are ready to move, but we need the land locked down, specifically that parcel on the ridge. The zoning is tricky, and the ownership history is a mess. Are you sure you can deliver the title?" I held my breath. The ridge. He was talking about the 10 acres Beatrice had bought in 1992. It was just scrubland then, rocks and weeds, but she had seen something in it. She had said, "Elijah, one day, the city will grow out that way and this dirt will be gold." We had never built on it. We had kept it waiting for the right time. I heard the sound of a chair scraping back. Gavin was standing up, likely pouring himself more brandy. "Don't worry about the title," he said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. The land is as good as sold. The deed is in the old man's name technically, but I handled it. How the woman asked, "Did you get him to sell? I thought you said he was difficult." Gavin laughed softly, a sound that made my skin crawl. Difficult. Yes. Senile. Also yes. Last week I told him he needed to sign some medical release forms for his insurance updates, for his hip surgery paperwork. Tons of fine print. He didn't read a word of it. He just signed where I pointed. The power of attorney transfer was buried on page 4, and the deed transfer was page 5. The old fool signed away a $2 million plot of land, thinking he was getting a discount on painkillers. The room erupted in low, appreciative chuckles. "Ruthless Gavin," the man said. "That is why we partner with you, but is it airtight?" "If he wakes up and realizes what happened," Gavin interrupted him. "He won't wake up. By the time the sale closes next week, I will have the competency order from the court. He will be in a state facility, comfortably medicated and unable to contest anything. The money from the land goes into the joint account which I control to pay for his care, of course. And by care I mean the down payment on that yacht we looked at." I stepped back from the door, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't just disrespect. This wasn't just cruelty. This was a felony. This was fraud. Grand larceny and elder abuse confessed in front of witnesses who were too greedy to care. I looked down at the smartphone Gavin had given me, the one he thought was a leash. I had set it to record. The moment I walked into the kitchen, I pressed stop on the recording app. The red light on the screen blinked once and went out. I had it. I had his voice, his confession, his arrogance captured in high-definition audio. He thought he was bragging to his partners. Didn't know he was reading his own Miranda rights. I took off the white jacket, folding it neatly and placing it on the counter. I didn't go back out to clear the dessert plates. Let them sit in their own mess. I walked to the basement door, my limp suddenly less painful. The adrenaline was doing its work. I went down into the dark, cool silence of the cellar. I sat on my cot and took out the burner phone I had hidden inside a hollowed-out book, a backup Thaddeus had insisted on. I dialed the lawyer's number. It was late, but I knew he would be awake. "Thaddeus," I whispered into the phone, looking up at the ceiling where Gavin is. Footsteps were pacing back and forth. "Get the papers ready. Not just the lawsuit, the criminal complaint. He just confessed to forging my signature on the land deed, and Thaddeus, call the bank. Tell them to block any transaction related to the Ridge property." I hung up and lay back on the cot, staring at the dust motes dancing in the beam of the street lamp coming through the high window. Upstairs, Gavin was probably toasting his genius. He was celebrating the yacht he was going to buy with my wife's vision. He thought he had won. He thought the game was over. But as I closed my eyes, I smiled. The game hadn't even started yet. He had taken my queen when he threw away Beatrice's book. He had tried to take my castle when he moved me to the basement. But he forgot that in chess, a pawn that makes it across the board can become anything it wants. And I was about to become his worst nightmare. The neon sign of Sal is. Diner flickered with a buzzing sound that matched the anxious humming in my chest. I sat in the back booth, the red vinyl cracked and taped over with silver duct tape, looking at the rain streak against the window. This place smelled of burnt coffee and bacon grease, the perfume of the working class. It was the last place anyone would look for a multimillionaire. It was the last place anyone would look for a revolution. Thaddeus Cole slid into the booth opposite me, bringing with him the smell of cheap tobacco and rain. He was 70 years old, wearing a suit that had been fashionable in 1985, but his eyes were sharp, alert like a hawk spotting a field mouse. He didn't say hello. He just signaled the waitress for coffee and slapped a thick manila folder onto the sticky table. "You look like hell." "Elijah," he said, his voice a gravelly rumble. "I suppose living in a basement will do that to a man." I didn't smile. I pushed the digital recorder across the table toward him. "Listen to this first," I said. Thaddeus put on his reading glasses and plugged in the headphones. I watched his face as he listened to Gavin's voice confessing to the fraud, to the forgery, to the plan to lock me away. Thaddeus's expression didn't change. He had seen the worst of humanity in his 40 years of practicing law. Nothing surprised him anymore, but his jaw tightened, just a fraction. He took the headphones off and looked at me. "That is a felony," he said quietly. "That is conspiracy. That is enough to put him away for 5 years, but Elijah, If we use this now, we just stop him. We don't destroy him. And after looking at what your wife left you, I think destruction is the only acceptable outcome." He opened the folder. The papers inside were covered in highlighters and sticky notes. Thaddeus tapped a document with a yellow-stained finger. "Elijah, I stayed up all night going through Beatrice's portfolio. I thought I knew finance. I thought I knew how the game was played. But your wife, she wasn't playing the game. She was rewriting the rules." He started laughing, a dry wheezing sound that turned a few heads in the diner. "You told me she was a cleaner, right? She scrubbed floors. Elijah, your wife is a shark. A great white shark, disguised as a goldfish." I looked at the papers, seeing names of companies I recognized from the news tech giants, pharmaceutical companies. Beatrice owned pieces of them all. But Thaddeus flipped to the back page, pointing to a company called Apex Construction Materials. "Do you know who this is?" Thaddeus asked. I shook my head. "It sounds like a supply yard," I said. Thaddeus nodded. "It is the biggest supply yard in the state. They supply steel, concrete, and lumber to every major developer in the city. And do you know who their biggest client is right now?" I felt a chill run down my spine. "Gavin," I whispered. Thaddeus grinned, revealing teeth stained by coffee. "Gavin is firm. The Hudson Project. He needs Apex to deliver the materials, or he defaults on his loans, and guess who owns 51% of Apex?" Thaddeus leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "BT Holdings, Beatrice Thorne. Holdings. Your wife didn't just invest, Elijah. She bought the supply chain. She literally owns the concrete. Gavin is trying to build his empire on." I sat back, stunned. Beatrice, my gentle quiet. Beatrice, who hummed gospel songs while she ironed my shirts. She had bought the company that Gavin depended on. It was poetic. It was divine justice. She must have heard him talking about his deals years ago. She must have known. "He needs Apex," I said slowly. "If Apex stops shipping..." Thaddeus finished the sentence. "If Apex stops shipping, Gavin's project stalls. The bank calls in the loan. The investors pull out. He is bankrupt within 30 days, and as the executor of the trust. Elijah, you are Apex. You can shut off the tap whenever you want." I looked at my hands, the same hands that had carried crates for 40 years. Now they held the power to crush a man who thought he was a god. But Thaddeus wasn't done. He closed the folder and leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "But we are not going to shut it off yet, Elijah. Not today." "Why not?" I asked, the anger flaring up. "I want him out. I want him to pay." Thaddeus shook his head. "Patience. That is the mistake amateurs make. They strike too soon. We need him to commit. We need him to be so deep in the hole that he can't climb out. We need him to sign those loans. We need him to leverage everything he has, including that house you are living in. And most importantly, we need him to believe he has won." Thaddeus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black chess piece, a pawn. He set it on the table between the salt shaker and the ketchup bottle. "Operation Trojan Horse," he said. "Gavin thinks you are a senile old man rotting in his basement. Good. Let him believe it. Be the senile old man. Shuffle your feet more. Forget names. Drool, if you have to. Make him feel so safe, so superior that he stops looking over his shoulder. I want you to sign the papers he gives you." Thaddeus continued. I stared at him. "Are you crazy? Sign the competency order. Sign the deed." Thaddeus held up a hand. "No, not the real ones. I have prepared a set of documents that look exactly like the ones Gavin drafted. But there is a clause in fine print on page 12, a clause that invalidates the signature if the signer is under duress or undisclosed surveillance. Since you have him recorded on tape planning to defraud you, any signature you give him is technically a trap. It is bait. Let him think he has the deed. Let him take it to the bank. Let him borrow millions against a house he doesn't own." I understood. It wasn't just about winning a lawsuit. It was about letting Gavin hang himself with his own rope. It was about letting him build a tower of lies so high that when it fell, it would bury him completely. I looked at the pawn on the table. It was the smallest piece on the board, the most expendable. But if a pawn makes it to the other side, it becomes a queen. "Can you do it, Elijah?" Thaddeus asked. "Can you go back to that basement and eat his scraps? Can you let him insult you? Let him treat you like a dog for one more week. I thought about the way Gavin had thrown Beatrice's dress into the mud. I thought about Maya turning her face away in shame. Yes, I said, my voice cold and steady. I can do it. I will be the best damn actor he has ever seen. Thaddeus nodded and took a sip of his coffee. Good. Because the board meeting for Apex is in 10 days, we are going to make sure you have a seat at the head of the table, and I want to see the look on his face when the supplier he is screaming at turns out to be his father-in-law. We spent the next hour going over the details. Thaddeus coached me on what to say, what not to say. He gave me a burner phone with the encrypted app to communicate, avoiding the surveillance on the smartphone Gavin had given me. He told me to start hiding assets from the house, small things that mattered only to me, putting them in storage. He told me to let the house get messy, to let the yard go wild, to feed Gavin's narrative that I was incompetent. When I left the diner, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, washed of the city, represents grime. I walked back to the house, my limp genuine but my spirit soaring. I wasn't just an old man anymore. I was a sleeper agent. I was a spy. I was the Trojan horse, wheeling myself into the fortress of Troy, waiting for night to fall. I entered the house through the back door, wiping my muddy shoes on the mat. I heard Gavin in the kitchen talking loudly on the phone. Yeah, the old man is out wandering. Again, probably feeding pigeons. He is harmless, total vegetable at this point. I just need him to sign the final transfer tomorrow. And we are golden. I walked into the kitchen, hunching my shoulders, dragging my left leg a little more than necessary. I let my mouth hang open slightly, giving him a vacant stare. Gavin looked at me and covered the phone mouthpiece. "Speak of the devil," he whispered, then addressed me. "Hey, Dad, find your way home." "Okay?" I nodded slowly, blinking like I was processing the words through a fog. Yes, I stammered. "Home. Nice walk." Gavin rolled his eyes and went back to his call. "See? Total vegetable." He waved his hand at me, dismissing me. "Go downstairs, Dad. Dinner is in an hour." Canned soup again. I shuffled toward the basement door, not letting him see the sharp glint in my eyes. I went down the stairs into the darkness, but this time the darkness didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a bunker. It felt like a command center. I sat on my cot and pulled Beatrice's passbook out from its hiding place inside my pillowcase. I ran my thumb over the taped spine. 51%. She had bought the controlling stake of the company that was building the city, and she had left it to me, to the man everyone thought was nothing. I looked up at the ceiling at the floorboards where Gavin was standing. "Enjoy your phone call, son," I whispered into the silence. "Enjoy your big deal because the concrete is about to dry and you are going to be stuck in it forever. The Trojan horse is inside the gates, and you opened the door yourself." The next morning the basement door opened and the smell of antiseptic drifted down into the damp air, disrupting the musty scent of mildew and old cardboard. I was sitting on my cot pretending to struggle with the buttons of my flannel shirt. My hands were shaking. Not because of age or infirmity, but because I was rehearsing the role of a lifetime. Gavin came down the stairs first, followed by a man I had never seen before. The stranger was tall, thin, and wore a suit. That was too shiny. He carried a black medical bag and had the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes, the kind of smile used by used car salesmen and funeral directors. "Dad," Gavin said, his voice booming in the small space. "This is Dr. Aris. He is a specialist I hired to take a look at you. You have been seeming a little foggy lately. We just want to make sure you are comfortable." Dr. Aris stepped forward, and I saw him glance around the basement with a look of distaste. He didn't introduce himself to me. He didn't shake my hand. He just opened his bag and pulled out a stethoscope, treating me like a piece of broken furniture that needed an appraisal. I sat still, letting him listen to my heart, letting him shine a light into my eyes. I played my part perfectly. I stared past him at the wall, my mouth slightly open, my breathing shallow. I let my head loll to the side as if holding it up was too much effort. "Excellent physical health for his age," Dr. Aris said, turning his back to me to address Gavin. "But the cognitive decline is evident. The agitation you described, the paranoia about the bank accounts, it is all consistent with early-stage dementia compounded by aggressive tendencies." Gavin nodded, looking solemn, acting the part of the concerned son. I have been so worried. Doctor, he gets confused. He thinks people are stealing from him. It is heartbreaking. I wanted to laugh, I wanted to scream, but I just sat there gripping the edge of the cot, letting them talk about me as if I wasn't in the room. It is a common tactic. Dehumanize the subject so you don't feel guilty about what you are about to do. Dr. Eris reached into his bag and pulled out a bright orange prescription bottle with no label. I recommend a heavy regimen of sedative H, he said, handing the bottle to Gavin. It will calm his nerves, reduce the paranoia, and help him sleep heavily. It makes them docile, manageable, 1 pill in the morning, 1 at night. Gavin took the bottle and I saw the greed in his eyes. He didn't care about my nerves. He cared about the word docile. He wanted me asleep while he dismantled my life. He wanted me confused so that when the lawyers came or the notary arrived, I would just be a drooling mess in the corner, nodding at whatever piece of paper was placed in front of me. Right now, Dad, Gavin said, unscrewing the cap, shaking out a small round white pill. Take this. It will help you relax. He poured a glass of water from the jug I kept on the crate and held it out to me. I looked at the pill in his palm. It looked innocent enough, just a small circle of compressed powder, but I knew what it was. Thaddeus had warned me. Chemical restraints. They call it medical care, but it is really a chemical lobotomy. I reached out my hand, trembling intentionally. I took the pill. Gavin watched me like a hawk. I put the pill in my mouth and immediately tucked it under my tongue, pushing it deep into the soft tissue near my molars. I took a sip of water and swallowed loudly, exaggerating the gulp. Gavin watched my throat move. Good, he said, patting me on the head like a dog. See. That wasn't so hard, was it? They left the basement, locking the door behind them. The moment I heard the click of the latch, I spat the pill into my hand. It was bitter, starting to dissolve, but still intact. I wrapped it in a piece of tissue and shoved it deep into a crack in the brick wall. Later, I would give it to Thaddeus for analysis, but now I had a bigger problem. Gavin had the bottle, and he would be back tonight to dose me again. I needed to make the swap. Thaddeus had given me a small tin of breath mints, sugar-free, white and round. They looked exactly like the poison Dr. Eris had prescribed. I waited until I heard the garage door open, signaling that Gavin had left for work. Maya was upstairs, probably in the shower, crying or drinking wine to numb her own guilt. I moved quickly, ignoring the ache in my leg. I went up the stairs and into the kitchen. The orange bottle was sitting on the counter right next to the coffee maker. Arrogance. Gavin was so sure of his control, he didn't even hide the evidence. I opened the bottle and dumped the sedatives into a plastic baggie I had in my pocket. Then I filled the bottle with the breath mints Thaddeus had provided. I screwed the cap back on and placed it exactly where it had been. I was about to turn back to the basement when I saw it. Gavin's laptop. It was sitting on the dining room table, humming slightly. The blue light of the power button pulsed like a heartbeat. He had forgotten it, or maybe he had just left it there because he thought I was too stupid to know how to use it. This was my chance. Thaddeus needed proof of the Apex deal. He needed the emails showing Gavin was leveraging the house. I walked over to the table. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I opened the lid. The screen came to life, asking for a password. I didn't know it, but I didn't need to. Thaddeus had given me a USB drive, a brute force keylogger used by forensic accountants. I plugged it into the side port. A small window popped up with a green progress bar. It was moving agonizingly slow, 10%, 20%. I looked at the ceiling, hearing the water running in the shower upstairs. If Maya came down now, if the water stopped, I was dead 50%. Come on, I whispered, looking at the screen. The files I needed were right there, folders, labeled Hudson Project and Deed Transfer. The little green bar seemed to mock me, crawling pixel by pixel. Suddenly the shower stopped. The pipes in the wall groaned and went silent. I froze. The progress bar was at 80%. I heard footsteps on the floor above me. Maya was walking around getting dressed. I could hear the closet door open. I could hear her humming a sad tune barely audible through the floorboards. 90%. The footsteps moved to the stairs. She was coming down. I couldn't pull the drive yet. If I pulled it before it finished, the data would be corrupted. I would have nothing. I stared at the screen, willing it to move faster. 95%. The footsteps were on the stairs now. Heavy, slow steps. 98%. I could hear her breathing. She was just around the corner in the hallway. Done. The screen flashed green. Complete. I yanked the USB drive out and shoved it into my sock. I slammed the laptop lid shut just as Maya walked into the dining room. She was wearing a bathrobe, her hair wet, wrapped in a towel. She stopped when she saw me standing by the table. "Dad," she asked, her voice startled. "What are you doing up here?" I forced my body to slump. I let my mouth hang open again, reverting to the character I was playing. I was looking for the bathroom. I mumbled, slurring my words intentionally. "I am lost. Maya. The water. I need water." Maya's face softened. The suspicion vanished, replaced by pity. "Oh, Dad," she sighed. "The bathroom is down the hall. You know that? Come on, let me get you some water." She walked past the laptop, not even looking at it. She didn't notice it was slightly askew. She didn't notice the warmth radiating from the hard drive. She poured me a glass of water from the fridge, her hands shaking. I took the glass, my hands shaking too, but for a different reason. I had the data. I had the proof inside my sock burning against my ankle. "You should go back downstairs, Dad," Maya said gently. "It is safer down there. Gavin will be home soon, and he won't like finding you wandering around." I nodded slowly, taking a sip of the water, looking at my daughter with eyes that I hoped looked vacant. I went back to the basement, clutching the glass of water like a trophy. I sat on my cot and listened to the house settle around me. That night, Gavin came down to give me my second dose. He watched me swallow the breath mint with a satisfied smirk. "Acts fast, doesn't it?" he said. Watching my eyelids droop, I let my head fall forward, faking sleep. "Good night, Dad," he whispered, turning off the light. "Don't let the bedbugs bite." The door locked and darkness swallowed the room. But in the dark, I pulled the USB drive from my sock and held it tight. I wasn't sleeping. I was wide awake and I was armed. The doctor thought he had sedated a patient. Gavin thought he had silenced a victim. But all they had done was give the wolf the keys to the hen house, and the wolf was hungry. The house was quiet in a way that felt heavy, almost like the air pressure before a tornado touches down. Gavin had left for the city early, claiming he had meetings to finalize the deal that would supposedly save us all, but I knew he was really finalizing the theft of my property. That left me alone with Maya for the first time in days. She was in the kitchen, sitting at the island with a glass of Chardonnay, even though it was barely noon. She was staring at her tablet, her fingers scrolling mindlessly through photos of furniture she wanted to buy for the home office that used to be my bedroom. I stood in the doorway watching her. For a moment, I didn't see the 35-year-old woman with the tired eyes and the marriage that was slowly eating her alive. I saw the little girl with pigtails who used to sit on my knee while I watched the evening news. The little girl who cried when her goldfish died. The little girl who promised she would buy me a big house one day so I wouldn't have to work so hard at the warehouse. That memory was a ghost, now haunting the space between us. I needed to know if that little girl was still in there somewhere, hidden beneath the layers of fear, and Gavin represents influence. Thaddeus had told me to be ruthless. He had told me that in war there are no civilians. But this was my daughter, my blood. I needed to give her one last chance, a lifeline before I pressed the button that would cut her loose forever. I walked into the kitchen, dragging my leg a little less than usual, letting the cane tap softly against the tile. Maya looked up, startled, gently hiding the wine glass behind a vase of flowers. "Oh, Dad," she said, her voice tight, anxious. "You startled me. Do you need something? Is your room okay down there?" She couldn't even call it the basement. She called it my room, as if it wasn't a damp concrete box next to the furnace. "It is fine, Maya," I said, pulling out a stool and sitting opposite her. "I just wanted to talk. We haven't really talked since the funeral." Maya sighed, rubbing her temples. "I know, Dad. It has been crazy. Gavin is just so stressed with this deal, and I have been trying to manage everything. You know how he gets when he is under pressure." I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the new lines around her mouth, the way she flinched when the ice maker in the fridge clattered. I saw a woman who was walking on eggshells in her own home, terrified of upsetting the man who held the purse strings. "Maya," I said softly, keeping my voice steady. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me, not as Gavin, his wife, but as my daughter." She put the tablet down, her expression guarding. "What is it, Dad? If this is about the clothes again?" Gavin said, "He is going to buy you new ones." Better ones. It is not about the clothes, I interrupted gently. I leaned forward, resting my rough hands on the cold marble counter. Maya, look at me. Suppose things were different. Suppose I wasn't just a retired logistics worker with a bad leg and a small pension. Suppose I had money. Real money. Suppose I could buy this house 10 times over. Maya let out a short, incredulous laugh, shaking her head. Dad, what are you talking about? Did you buy a lottery ticket or something? You know, gambling is a waste of money. Just listen. I pressed, urgency creeping into my voice. This is a hypothetical question. If I had millions in the bank, if I wasn't dependent on you and Gavin, would you still treat me like this? Would I still be sleeping in the basement? Would Gavin still talk to me like I am a dog? Maya stopped laughing. She looked at me, and for a second, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it shame? Was it realization? But then the shadow of Gavin fell over her mind just as surely, as if he were standing in the room. Her face hardened. The softness vanished, replaced by the cold, pragmatic mask she wore to survive her marriage. Dad, stop, she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. You are living in a fantasy world. This is exactly what Dr. Eris was talking about. You are having delusions of grandeur. You don't have money. You never had money. Mom never had money. You were working-class people who scraped by, and that is fine. There is no shame in that, but stop pretending you are something you are not, because it makes you look pathetic. The word hung in the air. Pathetic. My own daughter. The child. I had carried on my shoulders when she was too tired to walk, looked at me and saw nothing but a pathetic old man. I am not asking about the money. Maya, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, I am asking about my worth as a human being, as your father. If I had nothing to offer you but my love, would that be enough to keep me out of the basement? Maya picked up her wine glass and took a long swallow, draining it. She slammed the glass down a little too hard. Dad, you are being dramatic. You are a burden. Okay, there, I said it. You are a burden. You have medical bills, you have special needs, you repeat yourself, you take up space. Gavin is a saint for taking you in. Most men in his position would have put you in a state home weeks ago. He is letting you live here out of the goodness of his heart. And instead of being grateful, you sit here asking hypothetical questions about millions of dollars you don't have. She stood up, grabbing the tablet, hugging it to her chest like a shield. You need to wake up, Dad. This is reality. You have nothing. And because you have nothing, you don't get to make the rules. You don't get to demand the master bedroom. You take what you are given and you say, thank you. Now please go back downstairs. I have things to do. She turned her back on me, walking out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with the hum of the refrigerator and the echo of her words. You are a burden. Gavin is a saint. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty wine glass. I didn't feel anger. Not anymore. Anger is hot, fiery. It burns you up. What I felt was cold. It was the absolute zero of a relationship dying. The last thread of hope I had held on to the belief that my daughter was just a victim in this had just snapped. She wasn't just a victim. She was a collaborator. She had chosen her side. She judged people by their utility, by their bank accounts, just like Gavin did. And in her eyes, I was bankrupt in every way that mattered. I stood up slowly, leaning heavily on my cane. The pain in my leg was sharp, but the pain in my chest was a dull, hollow ache. I walked back to the basement, descending the 12 steps into the darkness. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't need to. I knew where everything was by now. I sat on the edge of the cot and pulled out the burner phone. I dialed Thaddeus' number. It rang twice before he picked up. Yeah, he answered, his voice gruff. Busy. It is, Elijah. I said, my voice sounded strange even to my own ears. Flat dead. Did you get the evidence? Thaddeus asked. I got more than that. I said I got the answer I was looking for. Thaddeus pulled the trust documents, the secondary beneficiary list. There was a pause on the line. Elijah, are you sure? Once we do this, there is no going back. If something happens to you, the money goes to the charity immediately. Maya gets nothing. Not a cent. Not even the house. I closed my eyes and saw the little girl with the pigtails one last time. Then I opened them and saw the woman who had just called me. Pathetic. Do it, I said coldly. Remove her name. Strike it from every policy, every account, every deed. She made her choice. Thaddeus. She thinks I am a burden, so I am going to remove the weight of my inheritance from her shoulders. She wants to live in reality. Let her live in the reality she created. I understand, Thaddeus said, his voice softening slightly. I will file the amendment today. It will be effective by midnight. Thank you, I whispered. I hung up the phone and lay back on the thin mattress, pulling the scratchy wool blanket up to my chin. Upstairs, I heard music start to play. Maya was playing jazz loud, probably to drown out the silence, to drown out the memory of our conversation. She was drinking her wine, looking at expensive furniture, dreaming of a life paid for by the sale of my dignity. She didn't know it yet, but she had just disinherited herself. She had traded a fortune for a cruel remark. She had traded a father, is love for a husband, is approval. And when the dust settled, when the truth came out, she would be the one standing in the ruins, wondering where it all went wrong. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, mourning the daughter who was still alive but who was dead to me. The grief was terrible, but the clarity was absolute. The test was over, and Maya had failed. The sound of a pen scratching against paper is usually innocuous. It is the sound of a grocery list being written or a birthday card being signed. But sitting in the shadows of the hallway listening to Gavin in the dining room, that scratching sound was violent. It sounded like a knife carving through the history of my family. I peered through the crack in the doorframe, my breath held tight in my chest. Gavin was sitting at the head of the table, the spot where I used to carve the turkey every Thanksgiving. Spread out before him were stacks of legal documents, heavy bond paper that smelled of toner and treachery. He wasn't reading them. He was signing them, rapidly, efficiently, and he wasn't signing his name. He was signing mine. I watched my son-in-law practice the signature one last time on a scrap piece of paper. He held it up to the light, comparing it to an old check of mine he had fished out of a drawer. He smiled, a cold, satisfied smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then he bent over the deed of sale, the document that would transfer the title of the house Beatrice and I had bought 40 years ago to a holding company he controlled. He pressed the pen down and wrote, Elijah Thorne, with a flourish. He didn't just forge a signature. He stole an identity. He stole my name to sell my sanctuary. I wanted to burst into the room. I wanted to tear the paper from his hands and wrap my cane around his neck. The rage was a physical thing, a hot iron in my stomach. But I froze, listening to the voice of Thaddeus in my head saying, Wait, Elijah, wait for the money. If you stop him now, it is just attempted fraud. Let him finish. Let him take the cash. The next afternoon, the invasion began. Gavin had told me to go sit in the backyard to stay out of the way because he had important clients coming. He told me not to speak to anyone, to just sit on the bench near the hydrangeas and look at the birds like a good little invalid. I sat there wearing my old cardigan, feeling the wind bite through the wool, watching the back door. At 2 o'clock, a black luxury SUV pulled into the driveway. A couple stepped out. They were young, polished, and radiated the kind of casual wealth that comes from never having to worry about the price of milk. The man was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, and the woman was holding a purse that looked like it was made of butter-soft leather. They walked around the side of the house, inspecting the siding, pointing at the windows Beatrice and I had installed ourselves to save money on labor. I heard the woman, his voice drifting over the fence, loud and critical. The structure is charming in a vintage sort of way, she said, wrinkling her nose. But the layout is archaic. We would have to gut the whole first floor, knock down these walls, open it up. It feels so cramped. Gavin walked out to meet them, his smile stretching so wide it looked painful. Oh, absolutely, he said, his voice dripping with charm. It is a complete teardown on the inside. The bones are good, but the aesthetic is stuck in the 70s. My father-in-law... Well, let's just say he wasn't much for interior design. We are selling it as is specifically for visionaries like you who can see the potential. I gripped the armrest of the garden bench, my fingernails digging into the wood. They were talking about destroying my life as if it were just a pile of bricks and mortar. They were talking about gutting the kitchen where Beatrice had taught Maya how to bake biscuits. They wanted to knock down the walls that held the pencil marks, measuring Maya's height from age 3 to 18. They didn't see a home. They saw a flip, a project, an asset to be liquidated. The man looked toward the backyard and saw me sitting there. He paused, looking uncomfortable. "Who is that?" he asked, pointing a manicured finger. Gavin laughed, waving a dismissive hand. "Oh, that is just Elijah. He comes with the house for now. Just kidding. He is moving to a facility next week. Don't worry about him. He is in his own world. Hardly knows what day it is." The woman looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Well, as long as he is out before we close," she said, "I don't want any complications. We can close as soon as the wire hits. Gavin promised I have the power of attorney signed and notarized. The title is clean. We are ready to move fast if you are." I sat there and let them talk about me like I was a piece of broken yard furniture. I let them discuss tearing down my home. I let Gavin sell my memories to the highest bidder. When they finally left, shaking hands and laughing about escrow periods, I waited until the SUV disappeared down the street. Then I pulled out my burner phone and called Thaddeus. He did it. I whispered, my voice trembling with suppressed fury. He forged my name. He showed the house. They are talking about closing next week. Thaddeus, I can't let them tear it down. I can't let strangers destroy what Beatrice built. Thaddeus's voice was calm, steady, an anchor in the storm. Elijah, listen to me. Do not intervene. Did they sign anything? Did money change hands? Not yet, I said, watching Gavin through the kitchen window. He was popping a bottle of champagne, pouring 2 glasses for him and Maya. They are celebrating right now. They think it is a done deal, good Thaddeus said. Let them celebrate, let them drink. Listen carefully. Elijah, this is the most dangerous part of the trap. In the state of Illinois, forgery is a crime. Yes, but if he sells that house and the transaction crosses state lines or involves a federally insured bank, which it does the moment the wire transfer hits, it becomes wire fraud. And if the amount is over $100,000, which it certainly will be, we are no longer talking about a civil suit or a slap on the wrist. We are talking about federal jurisdiction. We are talking about the FBI. But, the house, I stammered, they want to gut it. The house is safe, Thaddeus assured me. A fraudulent deed conveys no title. The moment we reveal the truth, the sale is void. The buyers get nothing. Gavin gets handcuffs. But we need that wire transfer. We need the money to hit his account. If you stop him now, he can claim it was a misunderstanding. He can claim he was acting in your best interest. We need him to take the money. That is the nail in the coffin. Can you wait? Elijah, can you watch him sell your soul for a few more days? I looked through the window. Gavin was laughing, clinking his glass against Maya. She looked hesitant at first, but then she smiled, sipping the champagne. Drinking to her father is homelessness. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the hydrangeas Beatrice had planted. Yes, I said. I can wait. Let him take the money. Let him choke on it. 3 days later, the moment arrived. The house was quiet. Gavin was pacing the living room, his phone in his hand, checking his banking app every 30 seconds. He was wearing his lucky tie, expecting the windfall that would save his failing business and fund his lavish lifestyle. I was sitting in the corner pretending to read a newspaper from 3 days ago. Suddenly his phone pinged. A loud, cheerful chime that echoed in the silent room. Gavin stopped pacing, looked at the screen, and his knees almost buckled. He let out a shout of pure, unadulterated greed. Yes, he yelled, punching the air. Yes, done. It is done. Maya ran in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Did it go through? She asked, her eyes wide. $150,000 earnest money, Gavin crowed, showing her the screen. And the rest follows at closing, in 10 days. We are rich, baby. We are back. The cash is in the account. He grabbed Maya and spun her around, laughing hysterically. Then he turned to me, his eyes shining with a manic light. Hey, Elijah, guess what? Good news, I just sold the house. We are going to be moving you to that nice facility sooner than we thought. You should be happy, Dad. I got a great price for this dump. I lowered the newspaper slowly. I looked at the man who had just committed a federal crime in front of me. I looked at the son-in-law who had sold my roof over my head for a wire transfer. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I forced my lips into a tremulous, confused smile, that is. Nice, Gavin, I mumbled, playing the fool one last time. Will, I have a window in the new place. Gavin laughed, patting my cheek with a condescending smack. Sure, Dad, you will have a window. You will have a view of the parking lot. Now, if you will excuse us, we are going out to dinner to celebrate real food, steak and lobster. There is some leftover mac and cheese in the fridge for you. Don't wait up." They left an hour later, dressed in their finest clothes, leaving me alone in the house they thought they had sold. I walked to the window and watched their car taillights fade into the distance. Then I walked to the kitchen and picked up the phone. Not the burner phone. The landline. I dialed Thaddeus. "The wire hit," I said quietly. $150,000. He confirmed it. He is celebrating. Thaddeus's voice was grim and satisfied. "Got it. I am looking at the transaction record on the bank server right now. It is flagged. The trap is sprung. Elijah, do not sleep tonight. Pack your things. Get the files. From the garage tomorrow morning, we are not going to the park. We are going to the board meeting of Apex Construction, and after that we are going to the district attorney." I hung up the phone and looked around the kitchen. It didn't look like a teardown to me. It looked like a fortress, and the enemy had just walked right into the dungeon and locked the door behind him. Gavin thought he had just made the deal of a lifetime. He didn't realize he had just sold his freedom for a deposit on a prison cell. I went to the fridge and took out the mac and cheese. I ate it cold, standing up. It was the best meal I had tasted in years because it tasted like justice. The storm broke over the city just after sunset, a violent, brooding tempest that rattled the window panes of the house I had built. The sky turned the color of a bruised plum, and the wind howled through the eaves like a mourning ghost. It was fitting, really. The weather always seems to know when a tragedy is about to happen. Inside the house, the air was thick with a different kind of pressure. Gavin was drunk on expensive scotch, but mostly drunk on the power of the wire transfer that sat in his bank account. He paced the living room with a manic energy, his eyes darting around the space he believed he had just conquered. I was sitting in the kitchen eating a sandwich of dry bread and cheese, listening to the thunder roll. Maya was upstairs packing boxes, pretending to be busy so she wouldn't have to look at me. We were in a holding pattern, waiting for the inevitable eviction that Gavin had promised would happen next week. But Gavin, being Gavin, decided that next week was too far away. He needed to flex his muscle now. He needed to clear the debris from his construction site, and I was the debris. He walked into the kitchen, the smell of alcohol preceding him like a warning flare. He stopped in the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching me chew. He didn't say anything at first. He just watched me with a look of pure, unadulterated loathing. It wasn't just that I was old, or that I was in his way. It was that I existed. My very presence reminded him that he was a parasite living in a host body. "You know, Elijah," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "You really embarrassed me today with the buyers. You just sat there staring like a zombie. It was creepy. My clients were uncomfortable. They asked if you were dangerous." I put the sandwich down slowly. I didn't look at him. I looked at the rain lashing against the glass. I didn't say a word to anyone. "Gavin," I said quietly, "I did exactly what you told me to do. I sat on the bench." "That is the problem," Gavin snapped, pushing off the doorframe and stumbling into the room. "You exist. You sit there looking pathetic, dragging that leg around, making the house smell like failure. We can't have you here anymore. Not even for another week. The buyers want to do a final walkthrough tomorrow morning, and I won't have you haunting the hallways, scaring them off." He slammed his hand onto the table, making my plate jump. "You are leaving. Tonight." I looked up at him. Then my eyes met his, and I saw the darkness there. It was the darkness of a man who has sold his soul and is terrified that someone might ask for a refund. "Tonight," I repeated calmly, coldly. "It is storming, Gavin. Where do you expect me to go?" "I don't care," Gavin spat. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash, peeling off $200 and throwing them onto the table. The bills fluttered down, landing in my half-eaten sandwich. "Go to a motel. Go to a shelter. Go to hell for all I care. Just get out of my house." "Your house." I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "My house," Gavin screamed, his face turning a blotchy red. "The deed is signed. The money is in the bank. It is my house. And I have the right to evict trespassers. And that is what you are, Elijah. A trespasser. You have no rights here anymore." Maya ran into the room, drawn by the shouting. She stood by the fridge, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. "Gavin, stop!" she pleaded. "It is pouring rain. You can't throw him out in this. He is 72 years old. Gavin whirled on her, his hand raised, and for a second I thought he was going to strike her. "Shut up, Maya," he roared. "You are always defending him. He is a leech. He has been bleeding us dry for years, eating our food, taking up our space. Well, the ride is over. I am the man of this house, and I say he goes." He turned back to me and grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. "Get your things. You have 10 minutes, or I call the cops and tell them you attacked me." I stood up, shaking off his hand. I didn't need 10 minutes. I had been packed for days. My bag was already by the back door, hidden under a coat. It contained the only things that mattered: the photo of Beatrice, the passbook, the recording device, and my dignity. I walked to the door. My limp pronounced my cane tapping a steady rhythm on the linoleum. I stopped and put on my old trench coat, buttoning it slowly, deliberately. Gavin watched me, panting slightly, his chest heaving. Maya was sobbing quietly in the corner, but she didn't move toward me. She didn't try to stop him. She just cried, tears of cowardice. I picked up my bag. It was light, heavy with memories, but light in mass. I reached for the doorknob, but Gavin wasn't done. He needed to twist the knife one last time. He needed to make sure I was completely destroyed. "Oh, and Elijah," he said, his voice dropping to a cruel sneer. "Don't bother trying to use your debit card. I called the bank this afternoon. As your power of attorney, I reported the card, lost, and froze the account for suspicious activity. And I called the insurance company too. I canceled your supplemental health coverage, telling them you were moving to a state facility that covers it. So if you slip and fall out there in the rain, try not to break anything. It will be very expensive." He smiled, a shark revealing its teeth. "Your pension check. It is being redirected to the new account, the one I control. So don't think you can just check into a hotel and live it up. You are destitute, Elijah. You are a pauper. You have nothing except what is in your pocket." He had thought of everything. He hadn't just evicted me. He had tried to erase my existence. He had cut every lifeline, stripped every asset, and left me naked to the elements. He wanted me to crawl. He wanted me to beg. He wanted me to fall on my knees and kiss his feet for a place to sleep. I looked at Maya, expecting her to react to this monstrous cruelty. Canceling a sick man represents health insurance as a death sentence. But she just looked down, unable to meet my gaze. She was broken, defeated by the monster she had married. I opened the door. The wind ripped it from my hand, slamming it against the siding. Rain sprayed into the kitchen, soaking the floor instantly. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the foundation of the house Beatrice and I had built. I turned back to Gavin one last time. He was standing there, smug, triumphant, holding his glass of scotch like a scepter. He thought he was looking at a defeated old man. He thought he was looking at trash. I adjusted my hat, pulling the brim down low over my eyes. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I spoke in a voice that was low and hard, like the steel I used to move in the warehouse. "You think you have won, Gavin," I said. My voice cut through the sound of the storm. "You think you have cleared the board, but you forgot one thing. Beatrice didn't raise a fool, and I didn't work for 40 years to be taken down by a boy in a cheap suit." Gavin laughed. "Get out, old man. Save the speech for the pigeons." I stepped out onto the porch, the rain instantly soaking through my coat. I looked back at him, framed in the warm yellow light of the kitchen, the warmth I was leaving behind. But it wasn't warmth. It was a fire that was about to consume them. "You just threw away a winning lottery ticket, Gavin," I said loud enough for him to hear over the wind. "You threw it in the trash, just like you threw away that book. But remember this. When you wake up tomorrow and realize what you have done, don't come looking for me, because the man you just kicked out doesn't exist anymore." I slammed the door shut. The sound was final, absolute. I heard the lock click instantly from the inside. Gavin locking me out. Gavin locking himself in. I walked down the driveway into the deluge. The rain was cold, freezing, but it felt cleansing. It washed away the smell of that house, the smell of betrayal and greed. I didn't look back at the window where I knew Maya was watching. I kept my eyes forward on the streetlights reflecting in the puddles. I walked to the corner where a black sedan was waiting, idling with its lights off. The window rolled down and Thaddeus looked out, his face grim, illuminated by the dashboard lights. "He did it?" Thaddeus asked. I opened the door and slid into the dry, warm leather interior of the car. I tossed my wet hat onto the seat and wiped the rain from my face. "He did it," I said. "He kicked me out. He froze the pension. He canceled the insurance. He took the bait. Thaddeus hook, line, and sinker." Thaddeus nodded, shifting the car into gear. "Did he say the line? Did he say it was his house?" "He screamed it," I replied, pulling the digital recorder from my pocket and stopping the recording. "I have it all. The eviction, the financial abuse, the confession of canceling my medical coverage. It is all here." Thaddeus smiled a slow, dangerous smile. "Then let is go. Mr. Thorne, your suite at the Ritz-Carlton is waiting, and tomorrow morning we start the demolition." As the car pulled away, splashing through the water, I looked back at my house one last time. It looked small in the rearview mirror, darker than the rest of the street. A tomb, and inside two ghosts were toasting to a fortune they would never see. I wasn't homeless. I was liberated. And the storm was just beginning. For 30 days, the world thought Elijah Thorne was dead, or if not dead, then erased, washed away into the sewers of the city, along with the rest of the refuse from the storm. They checked the homeless shelters for a week, or at least Maya did. I know this because I saw the reports from the private investigator. She called 3 shelters in the county morgue asking for a 72-year-old black male with a limp. When the answers came back negative, she stopped calling. She assumed the worst, or maybe she hoped for it. It is easier to mourn a dead father than to live with the guilt of an abandoned one. But I wasn't dead. I was undergoing a resurrection. The night Thaddeus picked me up in the rain, we didn't go to a motel. We went to the penthouse of the Millennium Tower, a building of glass and steel that pierced the skyline like a needle. Beatrice had bought the unit 10 years ago under a shell company. She called it her bird nest, a place she never lived in but kept ready for an emergency. I remember walking in dripping wet, leaving puddles on the marble floor, staring at the view of the city lights below me. It looked like a circuit board, and for the first time in my life, I was the one holding the controller. For the next month, I lived a life that Gavin could only dream of, while he was down there playing pretend with stolen money. I slept in a bed with sheets made of Egyptian cotton, so soft they felt like water against my skin. I ate meals prepared by a private chef designed to restore the nutrients. Years of cheap food had depleted, but the most important change wasn't the luxury, it was the repair. Thaddeus didn't just bring me a lawyer, he brought me a doctor, a specialist in orthopedic reconstruction who looked at my leg, the leg that had been crushed in the warehouse, and told me something that made me weep. "Elijah, this isn't permanent damage, it is neglect. The limp comes from a poorly set bone and years of inflammation. We can fix this, not completely, but enough to make you stand tall again." So while Gavin and Maya were busy spending my money, I was busy reclaiming my body. I went through intensive physical therapy. The pain was excruciating, sharper than anything Gavin had ever inflicted on me, but it was a good pain. It was the pain of healing, not the pain of dying. I spent my mornings on the balcony watching the sun rise over the city, reading the reports Thaddeus brought me. The reports were a daily chronicle of Gavin represents gluttony. He was like a starving man, let loose at a buffet, gorging himself until he was sick. The wire transfer from the fraudulent house sale had cleared, giving him a false sense of invincibility. He bought a new Porsche, not a lease, but a purchase paid in full. He joined the exclusive country club that had rejected his application twice before paying the initiation fee in cash. He hired a team of contractors to gut my house, ripping out the kitchen cabinets Beatrice had, loved tearing up the hardwood floors I had sanded by hand. I looked at the photos. The investigator took photos of dumpsters in my driveway filled with my life. There was my armchair sitting on top of a pile of drywall. There were the books I had collected for 50 years soaking in the rain, watching them destroy my past. Didn't hurt anymore. It felt distant, like watching a demolition crew clear a site for a new skyscraper. They were clearing the way for my future. They just didn't know it yet. Maya was spiraling in a different way. The reports said she was spending thousands at luxury spas, buying jewelry, drinking expensive wine at lunch. She was trying to fill the hole in her soul with consumerism, trying to drown out the voice in her head that asked where her father was. She told her friends I had moved to a specialized facility in Florida for my dementia. She created a narrative, a lie, to protect her social standing. She wore black to brunch, playing the grieving daughter while wearing a diamond necklace bought with the proceeds of her crime. One afternoon, Thaddeus sat across from me on the terrace sipping an iced tea. He looked at me and smiled. "You look different, Elijah." "It isn't just the suit." I looked down at myself. I was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit tailored to fit my new posture. I had shaved the scraggly white beard I had grown in the depression of the basement. My hair was trimmed. I didn't look like a retired warehouse worker. I looked like what I actually was, the majority shareholder of a multi-million-dollar conglomerate. "I feel different." "Thaddeus," I said, "I feel dangerous." "You should," Thaddeus replied. He opened his briefcase and laid out the final pieces of the puzzle. "The trap is fully set. Gavin has leveraged everything. He used the house money as a down payment, but he needed more for the merger, so he took out a bridge loan using his company stock as collateral. And here is the kicker. He listed Apex Construction Materials as his guaranteed supplier, banking on a discount he thinks he is getting because of his relationship with the previous owner. He doesn't know the previous owner is you. So if Apex pulls the plug," I asked. "If Apex pulls the plug," Thaddeus said, leaning forward, his eyes gleaming. "Gavin is bridge loan defaults. The bank seizes his company assets to cover the debt. He loses the Porsche, he loses the country club membership, and because he signed a personal guarantee, he loses his own condo. He will be left with nothing but the suit on his back, and since he committed wire fraud to get the initial capital, he won't just be poor, he will be federal property." I looked at the city below, watching the cars move like ants. Gavin was down there somewhere driving his new Porsche, laughing, thinking he was the king of the world. He thought he had discarded me like a broken toy. He thought I was rotting in a gutter or sleeping on a park bench, clutching a bottle of cheap liquor. He had no idea that the old man he kicked out into the rain was currently sitting 500 feet above him, holding the thunderbolt that would strike him down. "The board meeting is in 2 days, Thaddeus said, interrupting my thoughts. "Are you ready to reveal yourself?" I stood up. My left leg was stiff, but it held my weight. I didn't need the cane. I walked to the edge of the terrace and looked out. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. Beatrice had spent 30 years building this shield for me, and I had spent a month polishing it into a sword. "I am ready," I said. "I want to see his face. Thaddeus, I want to look him in the eye. When the tower falls, I don't want to just win. I want him to know exactly who beat him." Thaddeus nodded, closing his briefcase. "Then rest up, Mr. Chairman. The limousine will be here at 8 a.m. on Monday. It is time to go to work." That night I dreamt of Beatrice, not as the tired woman in the hospital bed, but as the vibrant, fierce woman who had walked into that bank 30 years ago. I dreamt she was standing next to me on the balcony, smiling, pointing at the city. She didn't say anything. She just squeezed my hand. And when I woke up, the sun was shining and the storm was over. The only thing left to do was to deliver the lightning. I spent the final day in silence, preparing my mind. I reviewed the speech I would give not to the board, but to Gavin. I practiced the look of cold indifference I would give Maya. I packed a small bag, not with clothes, but with the evidence. The recording of his confession, the photos of the dumpster, the forged deed. I was bringing the receipts of his sins. As the sun set on the 30th day of my disappearance, I sat in the leather armchair of the penthouse and poured myself a glass of vintage whiskey, specifically the brand Gavin liked to pretend he knew about. I took a sip and let the warmth spread through my chest. "Here is to you, Gavin," I whispered to the empty room. "You wanted my house. You wanted my money. You wanted me gone. Well, tomorrow you get your wish. Elijah, the victim is gone. Elijah, the father, is gone. Tomorrow you meet Elijah, the reckoning. And I promise you, son, it is going to be a meeting you will never forget. The view from the 42nd floor of the Millennium Tower offers a perspective on the world that I had never known existed. Down there on the pavement, people were ants scurrying about their business, chasing buses and deadlines, oblivious to the invisible currents of power that moved above their heads. For 72 years, I had been one of those ants carrying heavy loads until my back broke, hoping for a crumb to fall from the table. But now I was sitting at the table, and the man who had kicked me out into the rain was about to realize that he was not the diner. He was the meal. I sat in the high-backed leather chair facing the wall of glass that overlooked the financial district. On the table in front of me sat a secure laptop streaming audio from the bugs I had planted in my old house, and now, thanks to Thaddeus, represents connections from Gavin's office too. The sound quality was crisp, capturing every desperate breath, every frantic tap of a keyboard Gavin was unraveling. The Hudson Project, the merger that was supposed to be his coronation, was turning into his execution. For the past week, Gavin had been running into a wall named BT Holdings. He needed a unanimous vote from the shareholders to push the merger through before his bridge loans expired. He had bullied the smaller investors, he had charmed the board, but he could not get past the 51% block owned by the mysterious entity that had bought Apex Construction decades ago. He had called, emailed, and sent couriers to the registered address in Delaware, but all he got was silence. The silence was driving him mad. It was the silence of a predator who suddenly realizes the jungle has gone quiet because something bigger is hunting him. I listened as he screamed at his secretary over the speakerphone, "Get me a contact name, damn it! How can a company own half the supply chain and not have a phone number? Don't care if it is a blind trust. Find out who the trustee is. I need that vote by Monday, or the whole deal collapses. Do you understand? The bank is breathing down my neck." I took a sip of water, cool and clean. Thaddeus sat across from me, calmly reading the Financial Times. He didn't look up. He didn't need to. We both knew who the trustee was. We both knew that the only phone that would ring was the burner phone sitting in my pocket. Currently turned off. Gavin was chasing a ghost, and the ghost was sitting right here enjoying the air conditioning. But desperation makes men do foolish things, dangerous things. Gavin was short on liquidity. The bribes he had paid to the zoning commissioners had drained his operating cash. The new Porsche and the country club fees had eaten his reserves, and now he needed a massive infusion of cash to buy the votes of 3 wavering board members who were starting to get cold feet. Without BT Holdings represents approval. He needed $2 million in cash, and he needed it fast. The banks had already tapped him out. His credit was overextended, so Gavin did what desperate men always do. He went to the shadows. The audio feed switched to the bug. In Gavin's car, I heard the hum of the engine, then the sound of the car stopping somewhere quiet, somewhere industrial. I heard a heavy metal door open and the sound of footsteps on concrete. Gavin was meeting with Victor Varga, a name that didn't appear in the society pages but appeared frequently in FBI surveillance logs. Varga was a hard money lender, a loan shark in a tailored suit who charged interest not in percentages but in blood. I listened as Gavin represented, voice trembled, trying to sound confident, trying to sell the con. "Mr. Varga, thank you for meeting me on such short notice. As I explained on the phone, this is just a temporary liquidity issue. The Hudson Project closes in 48 hours. Once the merger is signed, I will have access to $50 million in capital. I can pay you back double." Varga Represent's voice was deep, like stones grinding together. "I don't care about your merger. Mr. Miller, I care about collateral. You are asking for $2 million cash. You have no credit line left. What are you putting on the table?" There was a pause, a silence so heavy I could feel it through the speakers. I leaned forward, my heart rate picking up. This was the moment Thaddeus had predicted, the moment Gavin would bet his life. "I have real estate," Gavin said, his voice gaining a little strength. "I own a prime property in the historic district, a large lot recently zoned for development. I have the deed right here, free and clear." He was talking about my house, the house he had forged my signature to steal, the house he had supposedly sold to the young couple just days ago. But that was the beauty of Gavin Represent's greed. The closing with the young couple had been delayed. Thaddeus had pulled some strings at the title company, creating a bureaucratic logjam so the sale hadn't officially recorded yet. Gavin still held the forged deed, thinking he could use it one last time before the couple moved in. He was double-dipping, selling the same asset twice, once to the couple for the down payment, and now to a gangster for a loan. I heard the rustle of paper. Varga was inspecting the forged deed, giving Gavin the rope to hang himself. "This deed is in the name of Elijah Thorne," Varga said suspiciously. "Who is that?" "My father-in-law." Gavin lied smoothly. "He is incapacitated. I have full power of attorney. See, the medical documents are attached. He is in a home now, vegetable state. I have full control of the asset. It is worth $3 million easily. I am offering it to you as security against the $2 million loan." I gripped the arm of my chair. My knuckles turned white. Vegetable state. He was selling my life again, using my name to guarantee a debt to a criminal. Varga hummed a low, dangerous sound. "If this deal goes south, Mr. Miller, I don't want a house. I don't want to be a landlord. If you don't pay me back by Friday, I will take the value out of your skin. Do we understand each other? We understand, Gavin said quickly, too quickly. Absolutely. Friday, the merger happens. Monday, I will have the cash. Tuesday. You have nothing to worry about, Good Varga said. The sound of a briefcase snapping open echoed through the speakers. Here is the cash. 2 million. Don't make me come looking for you. Mr. Miller, I have a very expensive team of collections agents. I heard the car door close. Gavin let out a scream of relief, a primal shout of victory. He had the money. He had the bribe. He thought he had just bought his way out of the hole. He didn't realize he had just signed his death warrant. If the merger failed, if BT Holdings voted no, Varga wouldn't sue him. Varga would bury him. Thaddeus looked up from his paper, taking off his reading glasses. He did it, didn't he? He took the money. He took it. I confirmed, feeling a cold hollowness in my chest. He put the house up as collateral. He promised Varga he would pay by Friday. Thaddeus nodded slowly, his face grim. Then it is done. We have him on wire, fraud, embezzlement, elder abuse, and now dealings with organized crime. But more importantly, Elijah, we have him trapped. The moment you walk into that boardroom and vote, no, the merger dies. Gavin won't be able to pay Varga. He will be squeezed between the FBI and the mob. He has nowhere to run. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city lights. The rain had started again, a light drizzle blurring the view. I thought about Gavin driving home with a bag of dirty money, thinking he was a genius. I thought about Maya, probably trying on another pair of diamond earrings, oblivious to the fact that her husband had just mortgaged their lives to a shark. It is strange, Thaddeus, I said quietly. You spend your whole life trying to protect your children, trying to keep them away from the fire, and then you watch them pour gasoline on themselves and hand you the match. Thaddeus stood up and walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. You didn't light the match, Elijah. You just stopped blowing it out for them. They made their choices. Now they have to live with the consequences. I turned away from the window. The sadness was still there, buried deep, but the resolve was stronger. Tomorrow was the board meeting. The Hudson Project was the biggest deal in the city. Represents history. Every major player would be there. The press would be there. Gavin would be standing at the head of the table waiting for the representative of BT Holdings to arrive, expecting some lawyer he could bully or bribe. He wasn't expecting me. He wasn't expecting the man with the limp, the man who smelled of mothballs, the man he had thrown away like trash. I looked at Thaddeus. Get the car ready, I said, and call the barber. I want to shave. And Thaddeus, make sure my suit is pressed. I want to look my best when I destroy him. Thaddeus smiled, a rare, genuine smile. You are going to look like a king. Elijah. A king returning to reclaim his throne. I went to bed that night, but I didn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the hum of the city, thinking about the chessboard. Gavin had moved his pieces aggressively, taking my knights, taking my bishops, thinking the game was about speed. But he forgot the most important rule of the game: the king can move in any direction, and the king was done retreating. Tomorrow, I would step forward, and the game would end. The boardroom on the top floor of the Apex Construction headquarters was designed to intimidate. It was a cavern of polished mahogany and floor-to-ceiling glass that looked down on the city like Olympus looking down on mortals. The air conditioning was set to a crisp 68 degrees, but I knew that inside that room, Gavin was sweating. He was standing at the podium presenting the deal of his life to 20 of the most ruthless investors in the state. They were men and women who could smell weakness, like sharks smell blood, and Gavin was bleeding. He just didn't know it yet. I stood in the hallway adjusting the cuffs of my Italian suit. Thaddeus stood next to me, checking his watch. He looked at me and nodded, a silent signal that the stage was set. Inside, I could hear Gavin Represent's voice booming through the heavy oak doors. He was confident, charming, and completely full of lies. And that, gentleman, is why the Hudson Project is not just a development. It is a legacy, he was saying, his voice smooth as silk. We have secured the land. We have secured the zoning. And most importantly, we have secured the supply chain. Apex Construction Materials has agreed to be our exclusive partner, guaranteeing us materials at 20% below market rate. This margin alone ensures profitability within the first quarter. I listened to him lie about a company he didn't own, a company whose owner he had treated like garbage. I thought about Beatrice scrubbing floors to buy the first shares of this company. I thought about her hands rough and chapped counting dollar bills at the kitchen table. Gavin was building a castle on a foundation of theft, and he was using my wife's name to do it. I placed my hand on the brass handle of the double doors. I looked down at my legs. For years I had dragged my left leg, a constant reminder of the accident that had ended my career. But the surgery I had undergone during my month of hiding had done its job. The pain was gone, replaced by a stiffness that felt like strength. I stood up straight, pulling my shoulders back. I wasn't the old man in the basement anymore. I was the storm waiting to make landfall. I pushed the doors open. They swung inward with a heavy, majestic silence, interrupting Gavin mid-sentence. He froze, his laser pointer wavering on the projection screen. All 20 heads in the room turned toward the door, expecting a secretary or perhaps the caterer. What they saw was a 72-year-old black man wearing a three-piece suit that cost more than Gavin represents. Car walking with the steady, purposeful stride of a general entering a battlefield. Thaddeus walked a step behind me, carrying a briefcase like it was the nuclear codes. For a moment there was absolute silence, the kind of silence where you can hear a heart break or a career end. Gavin stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled onto a dock. He blinked, trying to reconcile the image of the man before him with the image of the father-in-law he had kicked out into the rain. Security. He finally stammered, his voice cracking high and thin. "How did this man get in here? This is a private meeting. Get him out!" I didn't stop walking. I walked straight down the center of the long table, ignoring the stares of the board members. I looked at Gavin directly, my eyes locking onto his. I didn't see a powerful CEO anymore. I saw a frightened little boy who had broken a vase and was trying to hide the pieces. "I don't think security will be necessary." "Gavin," I said, my voice projecting clearly through the room, deep and resonant. "I am not crashing the meeting. I was invited. Gavin laughed, a nervous, hysterical sound. "You are delusional. You are confused, gentlemen. This is my father-in-law. He suffers from advanced dementia. He must have escaped from his care facility. I apologize deeply for this interruption. I will have him removed immediately." He reached for the phone on the conference table, expecting the board to sympathize, expecting them to see a senile old man. But nobody moved. The chairman of the board, a silver-haired man named Mr. Sterling, looked from Gavin to me and back again. He saw the suit. He saw the posture. He saw the clarity in my eyes. And most importantly, he saw Thaddeus Cole, the most feared corporate litigator in the city, standing by my side. "Sit down, Gavin," Mr. Sterling said quietly. Gavin froze, his hand hovering over the phone. "What?" "But sir, he is." "I said sit down," Sterling repeated, sharper this time. Gavin sank into his chair, looking small and pale. I reached the front of the room and stood at the head of the table, blocking the projection screen that displayed "Gavin represents lies." I placed my hands on the mahogany surface, feeling the cool wood beneath my palms. I looked around the table, meeting the gaze of every investor present. "Good morning," I said. "My name is Elijah Thorne. I apologize for my lateness. My son-in-law seems to be under the impression that I am in a care facility, but as you can see, the only thing I have been caring for is my portfolio." A murmur went through the room. Gavin was shaking his head, muttering no under his breath, as if casting a spell to make me disappear. I continued. "You are here today to vote on the merger of the Hudson Project. You have been told that the supply chain is secure. You have been told that Apex Construction Materials is a silent partner ready to sign the exclusive contract I turned to." Look at Gavin. He was sweating profusely now, drops of perspiration running down his temple, ruining his makeup. "Is that correct? Gavin, did you tell them you had the approval of BT Holdings, the majority shareholder of Apex?" Gavin looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Please, Elijah," he whispered. "Don't do this. We can talk. We can work this out. I will give you the money back. I will give you the house. Just go." I ignored him, turning back to the board. "The problem, gentlemen, is that Mr. Miller here has never spoken to BT Holdings. He has never met the shareholder. He assumed that because the trust was blind, the owner was blind too. He assumed he could leverage a company he didn't own to fund a project he couldn't afford. Mr. Sterling leaned forward, clasping his hands. Mr. Thorne, are you suggesting that you represent BT Holdings? I smiled a cold, hard smile that Beatrice would have been proud of. I don't just represent them. Mr. Sterling. I reached into my inside pocket and pulled out the original share certificates, the ones Beatrice had kept in the safe deposit box for 30 years. I threw them onto the table. They slid across the polished wood, stopping right in front of Gavin. He looked down at them, and I saw the color drain from his face completely, leaving him gray and ashen. He saw the name on the certificates. He saw the signature, the handwriting he had seen on birthday cards and grocery lists for a decade. The handwriting of the woman whose clothes he had thrown in the mud. BT does not stand for some anonymous corporate entity, I said, my voice filling the room, hitting Gavin like a physical blow. BT stands for Beatrice Thorne, my wife, the woman who scrubbed your floors, the woman who cleaned your offices, and the woman whose legacy you tried to throw in the trash. Gavin let out a sound, a whimper that was audible to everyone in the room. He slumped forward, burying his face in his hands. The reality was crashing down on him. The loan shark, Varga, the bank fraud, the forged deed. It was all closing in. And as her husband, I continued, my voice rising to a crescendo. I am the sole executor of her estate and the only person with the legal authority to cast the vote for BT Holdings. I walked over to Gavin and leaned down close enough to smell the fear on him, close enough to see the pulse jumping in his neck. You wanted a silent partner, Gavin. Well, I am done being silent. You wanted to use my family as a stepping stone. Well, you just stepped on a landmine. I straightened up and looked at the board members who were now looking at Gavin with a mixture of horror and disgust. Apex Construction Materials votes. No, on the merger, I announced clearly. Furthermore, we are immediately freezing all credit lines extended to Mr. Miller. Represents firm pending a forensic audit of his assets. We have reason to believe that the collateral used to secure his bridge loans, specifically the property at 42 Oak Street, was obtained through forgery and wire fraud. The room erupted. Investors were shouting, pulling out their phones, calling their lawyers. Mr. Sterling stood up, pointing a finger at Gavin. You lied to us. You leveraged assets you didn't own. Gavin looked up, tears streaming down his face. Elijah, please, he sobbed. I am family. I am your son. I looked at him with zero emotion. I didn't see a son. I saw a stranger. My son would never treat a woman like Beatrice with disrespect. My son would never steal from the vulnerable. You are not my son, I said coldly. You are a bad investment, and I am liquidating you. I nodded to Thaddeus, who opened the boardroom doors. 2 police officers were waiting in the hallway, along with a man in a dark suit who I recognized as a federal agent. Gavin Miller, the agent said, walking into the room. You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, bank fraud, and identity theft. You have the right to remain silent. As they pulled Gavin from his chair, crying and begging, dragging him out of the room, he had entered as a king. I didn't feel joy. I felt peace. I felt the weight of the last few months lift off my shoulders. I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table, and for a second, I swore I could smell lavender starch, the smell of Beatrice. She was there. She had been there the whole time, and finally, everyone else could see her too. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a gunshot ringing in your ears and making the air feel thin and sharp. Gavin was slumped in his chair, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume 2 sizes too big for him. He was staring at the share certificates on the table, the physical proof of his destruction, but his eyes were darting around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an ally, looking for anyone who would tell him this was just a nightmare. But there were no allies here. The board members who had been toasting him 10 minutes ago were now looking at him with the cold, predatory gaze of men who realize they have almost been conned. Mr. Sterling, the chairman, slowly picked up one of the certificates, inspecting the signature. He looked at me, then at Gavin, his face hardening into a mask of fury. You knew, Sterling said, his voice barely a whisper. You knew the majority shareholder was his wife, and you lied to us. You told us you had a relationship with the owner. I didn't let Gavin answer. I stepped forward, commanding the room, not with volume, but with the weight of the truth I held in my hands. I signaled to Thaddeus, who placed a thick stack of documents on the table. The sound of the paper hitting the wood echoed like a gavel strike. It is worse than just a lie. "Mr. Sterling," I said, keeping my eyes fixed on Gavin, representing trembling form. "My son-in-law didn't just fabricate a relationship, he fabricated an entire financial reality. This folder contains the forensic audit of the Hudson Project, represents preliminary accounts." I opened the folder, revealing pages of highlighted transactions. Gavin flinched as if I had raised a hand to strike him. "Here," I pointed to a column of figures. "You will see withdrawals totaling $400,000 labeled as zoning consultation fees. These fees were paid to a shell company registered to Gavin Miller barely a week ago. He was siphoning the seed money, the capital you gentlemen provided, into his own pockets to pay for his car, his club membership, and his wife represents jewelry." A gasp went through the room. One of the investors, a woman with sharp glasses, stood up, slamming her hand on the table. "You stole our capital," she hissed. "I am not finished," I said, my voice cutting through the rising murmur. I turned the page, revealing a copy of a bank transfer. This is the most recent transaction. $2 million received from an entity known as Varga Capital. It was deposited into the company operating account yesterday, ostensibly to bridge the funding gap. Gavin represents. Head snapped up, terror flooding his eyes. He knew what was coming. He knew I knew about Varga. "Do you know who Varga Capital is, gentlemen?" I asked, looking around the room. "It is not a bank. It is not a venture fund. It is a front for Victor Varga, a loan shark who operates out of the warehouse district. Gavin here didn't just borrow money. He brought organized crime into your boardroom. He laundered dirty money through this merger, and when he couldn't pay it back, which he can't because I just killed his deal, Varga wouldn't be coming for Gavin. He would be coming for the assets of the Hudson Project. He would be coming for you." The room erupted into chaos. Men were shouting, accusing Gavin of recklessness, of endangerment. Mr. Sterling looked like he was about to have a stroke. He pointed a shaking finger at Gavin. "You brought a loan shark into this firm. You bet our reputation on blood money." Gavin stood up, his chair screeching against the floor. "No," he stammered, his hands holding up in surrender. "Listen, please. It is a bridge loan, just a bridge loan. I can pay it back, once we sign." "There is nothing to sign," I interrupted, my voice dropping an octave. Deadly calm. "I am the majority shareholder of Apex, and I am formally accusing you of embezzlement, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. As of this moment, I am exercising my right under the corporate bylaws to call for an immediate vote of no confidence." I looked at Sterling. "Do I have a second?" "Seconded." Sterling roared almost before the word was out of my mouth. "All in favor of terminating Gavin Miller represents employment and stripping him of all executive powers. Immediately say, aye." "Aye," the room shouted in unison, a chorus of rejection that shook the walls. "It is done," Sterling said. "You are fired, Miller. Get out of this building before I have you thrown out." Gavin stood there, swaying slightly. His world had collapsed in the span of 5 minutes. The merger was dead, his reputation was incinerated, and the debt to Varga was now a ticking time bomb attached to his chest. He looked at the board members, then he looked at me, and in that moment, something inside him snapped. The narcissist cannot handle humiliation. He can handle anger, he can handle fear, but he cannot handle being small. And looking at me, the old man he had kicked into the rain, the man he had called a vegetable, he felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. The mask of the civilized businessman fell away, revealing the violent, desperate animal underneath. "You," he screamed, a sound that tore at his throat. "You ruined everything. You jealous old cripple." He lunged. The movement was sudden, explosive. He grabbed a heavy glass water pitcher from the center of the table and hurled it at me. It missed my head by inches, shattering against the wall behind me, showering Thaddeus with glass and water. But Gavin didn't stop. He vaulted over the corner of the table, his face twisted into a rictus of pure hate, his hands reaching for my throat. "I am going to kill you," he shrieked. "I am going to kill you." The board members scrambled back, knocking over chairs, terrified, screaming for security. But I didn't move. I didn't step back. I didn't raise my cane. I stood my ground, watching him come, watching the madness in his eyes, because I knew something he didn't. I knew I wasn't alone. Just as Gavin represents fingers were inches from my lapel, 2 massive shapes stepped out from the shadows near the service entrance. They moved with a speed that belied their size, terrifyingly efficient. One of them, a man with hands like shovels and a scar running down his cheek. Caught Gavin, represents wrist in midair. The sound of the impact was a dull thud. Gavin represents momentum was stopped dead, as if he had run into a concrete wall. He gasped, looking up in confusion. The man holding him was Big Mike. Mike used to work the forklift at the warehouse with me 30 years ago. He was retired now, but he still had the grip of a hydraulic press. The other man, Sal, stepped in and grabbed Gavin. Represents other arm, twisting it behind his back with a practiced ease. Sal was an ex-Navy. And boxer who ran the gym where I did my physical therapy. Gavin screamed in pain as his arm was forced up toward his shoulder blades. "Let me go," he yelled, kicking out wildly. "Do you know who I am? I am the CEO of this company." "Not anymore." Mike grunted, his voice deep and rough. "Now you are just a punk trying to hit an old man." They forced Gavin down to his knees right there on the plush carpet in front of the investors he had tried to impress. He struggled, panting, sweating, spit flying from his mouth as he cursed me. Cursed Beatrice, cursed the world. I walked over to him, looking down at his upturned face. I saw the fear finally overtaking the rage. He realized he couldn't bully his way out of this. He realized physical strength was another thing he didn't possess. I leaned down, resting my weight on my cane, getting close enough so only he could hear me. "You never looked at the security guards, did you, Gavin?" I whispered. "You never looked at the janitors, or the drivers, or the warehouse workers. You thought they were invisible. You thought they were furniture. But they were my friends. They were my brothers. And while you were busy buying Porsches and looking in the mirror, I was building an army." Gavin stared at me, his eyes wide, shaking his head in disbelief. "You didn't just fight me, son," I continued. I stood up straight, adjusting my jacket. "You fought the people who built this city. And we always win." I nodded to Mike. "Get him up." They hauled Gavin to his feet but kept him restrained, his arms pinned painfully behind him. The fight had gone out of him. He hung there, limp, defeated, a broken marionette. Mr. Sterling straightened his tie, trying to regain his composure. "Mr. Thorne, shall we call the police?" Thaddeus stepped forward, brushing glass shards from his sleeve. "The police are already in the lobby, along with the federal agents. But I believe Mr. Thorne has one last piece of business to conclude before we hand him over to the authorities." I looked at Gavin one last time, taking out the sleek smartphone he had given me, the one with the tracking app. I held it up so he could see it. "You gave me this to track me," I said, "to make sure I didn't wander off. Well, I am returning it to you." I dropped the phone into his jacket pocket. "Keep it on," I said, "because Varga represents men are going to be calling you very soon, and you are going to need to tell them why you don't have their money. Maybe the FBI can protect you from them. Maybe not. But that is not my problem anymore." "Take him away," I said, waving my hand, dismissing him like a servant. Mike and Sal dragged him toward the door. Gavin didn't scream anymore. He just wept loud, ugly sobs of a man who sees the abyss opening up beneath his feet. The board members watched him go in silence. The only sound the scuffing of his Italian shoes as he was dragged across the floor he thought he owned. When the doors closed behind him, the silence returned to the room, but it was different now. It wasn't tense. It was respectful. The investors looked at, with a new understanding. They didn't see an invalid. They saw a titan. I turned back to the table and picked up the share certificates of BT Holdings. I placed them back in my pocket, next to the picture of Beatrice. "Now, gentlemen," I said, my voice steady, looking at the stunned faces around the table. "We have a mess to clean up. This merger is dead, but Apex Construction Materials is still very much alive. And we are going to talk about how this company is going to be run from now on with honesty, with integrity, and with respect for the people who actually do the work." I sat down at the head of the table, the chair Gavin had vacated warming beneath me. I motioned for Thaddeus to sit beside me. "Shall we begin?" I asked. And for the first time in 30 years, the board of directors listened to every single word I had to say. The boardroom was silent, but it was not empty. The air was thick with the smell of ruin, the specific metallic scent of a life dismantling in real time. Gavin was on his knees, on his titties. Expensive suit rumpled his hair, clinging to his forehead with cold sweat. The two security guards, Mike and Sal, held him there, not with malice, but with the professional indifference of men who were used to taking out the trash. The board members of the Hudson Project, the men and women who had held Gavin, represents future in their hands. 5 minutes ago now looked at him as if he were a contagious disease. They had retreated to the far walls, distancing themselves from the blast radius of his crimes. I stood at the head of the table, leaning lightly on the mahogany surface. The share certificates of BT Holdings lay before me like a royal flush. I watched Gavin struggle against the grip of the guards, his breathing ragged and shallow. He looked up at me, and in his eyes I saw the desperate calculation of a cornered rat. He was thinking of plea deals. He was thinking of bail. He was thinking of ways to spin this into a misunderstanding. But he didn't know that the storm hadn't even hit land yet. This was just the wind before the hurricane. The double doors at the far end of the room swung open again. This time it wasn't a dramatic entrance, it was a tactical one. 4 officers from the Economic Crimes Division walked in wearing windbreakers with federal insignias, but they weren't alone. Walking in front of them, clutching a briefcase to his chest like a shield, was a man Gavin knew very well. Mr. Henderson, the bank manager Gavin represents. Eyes widened until I thought they might split. "You," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You." Mr. Henderson stopped a few feet away. He looked nervous, being in a room full of sharks, but when he looked at Gavin, his expression hardened into something solid and angry. "Hello, Mr. Miller." Henderson said, his voice shaking slightly but gaining strength. "You remember me, the little man at the branch you screamed at on the phone, the man you threatened to fire when I asked for verification on the wire transfer. I didn't steal anything," Gavin stammered, looking from Henderson to the federal agents. "It was a loan. My father-in-law authorized it. I have the power of attorney." "That is the problem," Henderson said, opening his briefcase and pulling out a stack of documents stamped with federal seals. "You used a power of attorney that was flagged as fraudulent the moment it entered our system. But that is not why I am here. I am here because of the blind trust. You see, Mr. Miller, when you tried to leverage the assets of BT Holdings to secure your personal loans, you triggered a failsafe embedded in the trust represents charter by Beatrice Thorne herself. I stepped forward, allowing the weight of Beatrice represents name to fill the room." Henderson continued. "The charter states that any unauthorized attempt to access or leverage the trust assets by a family member triggers an automatic audit and a direct report to the FBI. You didn't just try to rob a bank, Mr. Miller. You tried to rob a federally protected financial entity designed to prevent exactly this kind of elder exploitation. The wire fraud charges aren't coming from the local police. They are coming from the Department of Justice. The lead federal agent, a woman with eyes like flint, stepped forward. "Gavin Miller, you are under arrest for 18 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of bank fraud and money laundering regarding the Varga transaction. You have the right to remain silent." Gavin let out a sound like a wounded animal. "No!" he shrieked, pulling against Mike. "Represents grip. It is a mistake. The old man is senile. He doesn't know what he is doing." He signed the papers. "Look at the papers." I shook my head slowly. The denial was pathetic but expected. However, Thaddeus was standing by the window holding a small plastic evidence bag. He walked over to the table, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. "We are not done," Thaddeus said, his voice rumbling like thunder. "The financial crimes are substantial, Mr. Miller, but money can be repaid. Fraud can be settled. There is something else in this room that carries a much heavier price." Thaddeus placed the plastic bag on the table. Inside was the orange prescription bottle, the one Gavin had given me in the basement, the one Dr. Aris had prescribed. "Do you recognize this?" Thaddeus asked. Gavin stopped struggling. He stared at the bottle, and for the first time I saw true terror. Not the fear of prison, but the fear of the electric chair. "That is his medicine," he whispered. "His sedative." Thaddeus picked up the bottle, holding it to the light. "We had the contents of the pills you gave." Elijah analyzed. "We also analyzed the pills you tried to force feed him the night before he left your house. You called it sedative H. You told the court it was to help him sleep." Thaddeus turned to the board members, holding the bottle up for them to see. "The lab report came back this morning. These pills contain high doses of haloperidol mixed with a synthetic compound often used in veterinary euthanasia. In a man of Elijah represents age and heart condition. This wasn't a sedative, it was a slow-acting poison. It causes cognitive failure, muscle paralysis, and eventually cardiac arrest. You weren't treating his dementia, Mr. Miller." You were manufacturing it, and eventually you were going to cure his life permanently. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Mr. Sterling put a hand over his mouth, looking at Gavin with absolute horror. Attempted murder, Sterling breathed. You tried to kill him. Gavin Represent's face turned a color I had never seen on a human being, a sickly, translucent gray. It wasn't me, he screamed, his voice high and hysterical. It was the doctor. Aris gave them to me. I didn't know. I just did what he said. We have Dr. Aris in custody, Thaddeus said calmly. He was picked up at the airport an hour ago, trying to board a flight to the Caymans. He is cutting a deal, Gavin. He says you specifically asked for something to accelerate the decline. He says you offered him $50,000 to make the old man stop being a problem. The federal agent stepped closer, pulling a pair of handcuffs from her belt. They weren't the plastic zip ties used for protesters. These were heavy steel cuffs, the kind used for violent felons. Add attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder to the charges. Turn around. Gavin collapsed. His legs simply gave out and he hung from Mike and Sal. Represent's grip like a wet coat. He was sobbing now, loud, ugly sobs that echoed off the glass walls. Please, he begged, looking at me. Elijah, Dad, please. I didn't mean it. I just wanted the house. I just wanted the deal. I looked down at him. I remembered the way he had laughed when he threw Beatrice Represent's book in the trash. I remembered the way he had looked at me in the rain. But I didn't feel anger. I felt a cold, surgical detachment. You didn't just want the house, Gavin, I said softly. I leaned in so he could see the clarity in my eyes. You wanted to erase me. You wanted to take my life, my history, and my dignity and turn them into a down payment on a Porsche. But you forgot one thing, Beatrice Thorne didn't leave her money to a victim. She left it to a fighter, and you just picked a fight with the wrong weight class. The agent grabbed Gavin, Represent's wrist, twisting it behind his back. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the loudest sound in the world. Click, click, click. It was the sound of a door closing forever. It was the sound of justice. And then, the final betrayal happened. The narcissist, realizing he was drowning, reached out to pull someone else down with him, anyone who could cushion his fall. It wasn't my idea, Gavin screamed as they hauled him up. He twisted his head, looking wildly around the room, looking for a scapegoat. It was Maya. It was her idea. The room went dead silent. I froze. The mention of my daughter Represent's name was a knife in my gut, even after everything. She hates him, Gavin yelled, spit flying from his lips. She told me he was a burden. She told me she wished he would just die so we could sell the land. She signed the medical release. She knew about the pills. She wanted the money as much as I did. She is the one who told me to throw him out in the rain. Arrest her too. Don't let her get away with it. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. The air in the room felt suddenly thin. He was lying, or maybe he was telling the truth. It didn't matter. The fact that he would throw his wife, the woman he claimed to love, into the fire to save his own skin was the final proof of his rot. He was a creature of pure selfishness, consuming everyone around him. The agent pushed Gavin forward, forcing him to walk. "Get him out of here," she ordered. Gavin continued to scream as they dragged him toward the double doors, accusing Maya, accusing me, accusing the world of conspiring against his genius. I watched him go, watched the man who had terrorized my twilight years be reduced to a weeping criminal in handcuffs. When the doors finally closed, cutting off his screams, the silence that returned was heavy but clean. Mr. Sterling walked over to me. He looked shaken, his face pale. He extended a hand. Mr. Thorne, Sterling said, his voice respectful, almost reverent. I don't know what to say. We had no idea. We nearly let a monster take control of this firm. You saved us. I shook his hand, my grip firm. I didn't save you, Mr. Sterling. I saved my wife. Represents legacy. What you do with your firm now is up to you, but Apex Construction will be watching very closely. I turned to Thaddeus. Let us go, I said. I felt tired, a deep bone weariness that comes after the adrenaline fades, but it was a good tired. It was the tired of a man who has finished a long, hard shift and can finally go home. We walked out of the boardroom, leaving the stunned investors behind. We took the elevator down to the lobby where a crowd of reporters had already gathered. drawn by the siren's flashes, went off, blinding white lights capturing the image of Gavin Miller being shoved into the back of a federal cruiser. I stood on the steps of the building watching the car drive away, taking my tormentor to a place where money couldn't help him. I thought about Maya alone in that empty house, waiting for a husband who would never come home, waiting for a fortune that never existed. The net had closed. The wolf was caught. But the tragedy wasn't over yet. There was still one more person who had to answer for their sins, and she was waiting for me in the house that Beatrice built. The penthouse was quiet, the kind of silence that usually exists in cathedrals or graveyards. Thaddeus had left an hour ago, taking the federal agents and the lawyers with him, leaving me alone with the view of the city that was slowly turning from twilight to darkness. I stood by the window looking down at the streets where police cars were still flashing their lights. Ferrying Gavin to a holding cell, I held a glass of water in my hand, staring at the condensation running down the side, trying to wash away the memory of my son-in-law screaming as he was dragged away. But the peace I felt was fragile, because I knew the final act wasn't over. Yet, there was one more visitor coming. One more ghost I had to face. The intercom buzzed a harsh sound that made me flinch. The doorman represents voice came through, tinny and apologetic. "Mr. Thorne, your daughter is here. She says it is an emergency. She is very upset, sir. Should I send her up?" I took a deep breath, feeling the old ache in my leg, a phantom pain from a life I had left behind. "Send her up," I said quietly. I unlocked the heavy oak door and left it ajar, retreating to the living room, sitting in the leather armchair that faced the entrance. I didn't turn on the lights. The glow from the city below was enough. It cast long shadows across the room, hiding my face but illuminating the space where she would stand. I wanted her to see the luxury I lived in. I wanted her to see the power she had mocked. I heard the elevator ding, then the sound of footsteps running down the hallway. Maya burst into the room. She didn't look like the woman who had hosted brunches and bought designer shoes. She looked like a shipwreck. Her hair was messy. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black rivulets, and she was wearing a coat that was buttoned wrong. She stopped when she saw me standing in the center of the room, trembling like a leaf in a storm. "Dad," she cried, her voice breaking into a sob. "Dad, thank God you are okay. I was so worried." She ran toward me, her arms outstretched, expecting the embrace, expecting the forgiveness that fathers are supposed to give freely, like water. But I didn't stand up. I didn't open my arms. I sat there still as a statue, my hands resting on the arms of the chair, watching her come closer, watching the performance. She stopped a few feet away, confused by my stillness. "Dad," she whispered, "did you see what happened? The police. They took Gavin. They said he stole money. They said he tried to hurt you. I didn't know, Dad. I swear I didn't know. He lied to me, too." She fell to her knees on the rug, burying her face in her hands, weeping loudly. "He is a monster," she sobbed. "He tricked me. He told me everything was legal. He told me you wanted to move to the facility. He controlled everything. Dad, I was a victim just like you. You have to believe me. I am your little girl." I listened to her cry, listening for a note of truth, a single vibration of genuine remorse. But all I heard was fear of poverty, fear of social judgment, fear of losing the lifestyle that Gavin represents. Crimes had bought her. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying for the credit cards that were about to be declined. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the digital recorder. The same small black device I had used to capture Gavin represents confession. But today I didn't need Gavin represents voice. I needed hers. "Maya," I said, my voice cutting through her sobs, calm and dry. "Stop crying." She looked up, her eyes red and swollen, sniffing loudly. "Dad, please, I need help. The bank locked the accounts. They are going to take the house. I have nowhere to go. You have to help me. We are family." "Family," I repeated, tasting the word. It tasted like ash. "Is that what we are?" "Of course," she said, desperate, grasping at my pant leg. "You are my father. I love you." Gavin brainwashed me. He made me think you were sick, but I defended you." "Dad," I tried to stop him. I looked at her, at the lie spilling from her lips so easily. I pressed the play button on the recorder. The sound was loud in the quiet room, crystal clear, amplified by the silence. It was the recording from the kitchen. The day I asked her the hypothetical question. The day I gave her the last chance, my voice came from the speaker tinny but distinct. If I had millions in the bank, would you still treat me like this? Then came her voice. Not the sobbing victim represents voice I heard now, but the cold, arrogant voice of the woman who had stood in my kitchen drinking wine. Dad, stop. You are living in a fantasy world. You are a burden. Gavin is a saint for taking you in. You have nothing, so you don't get to make the rules. Maya froze. The color drained from her face, leaving it a sickly gray. She stared at the recorder in my hand, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. The recording continued, playing her cruel words back to her, stripping away every lie she had just told. You are a burden. You are pathetic. I clicked the stop button. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, heavier than the air in the basement had ever been. I didn't know you were recording, she whispered, her voice trembling with a new kind of fear. Not fear of the police, but fear of the truth. I was always listening. Maya, I said quietly. I was listening when you laughed at my clothes. I was listening when you complained about the smell of my medicine. And I was listening when you told your husband to throw away. My wife is things because they were junk. You weren't brainwashed. You weren't a victim. You were a willing participant. You liked the money, Maya. You liked the status. And you decided that the price for that status was my dignity. She scrambled back, sitting on her heels, wiping her face frantically. Dad, I didn't mean it. I was stressed. Gavin was pressuring me. I said things I didn't mean. You meant every word I said, shaking my head sadly. You meant it because you thought I was powerless. You thought I was debris, something, to be swept aside. And that is the tragedy here. Maya, you only respect people when you think they can do something for you. You didn't love your father. You loved what you could take from him, and when you thought there was nothing left to take, you threw me away. I stood up then, towering over her, using the cane, not for support, but for emphasis. Do you know what happened today? I asked. Gavin lost everything. He is going to prison for a very long time, but you lost something even more valuable. You lost the right to call yourself Beatrice. Thorn represents daughter. Maya represents eyes widened, panic setting in. Dad. No, please, you can't do this. I have nothing. The feds seized the accounts. I can't pay the mortgage. I can't buy food. You have money now. You have millions. You can't let your own daughter starve. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights again. I am not going to let you starve. I said, my back to her, because I couldn't bear to look at her anymore. I am not a monster. I am not Gavin. I turned back, facing her. I have set up a new trust for you, Thaddeus, drafted it this morning. It is very specific. Hope flared in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought the money was coming back. The trust. I continued, my voice hard, as Steele will pay for a small one-bedroom apartment in the city. Not a luxury condo. A safe, clean apartment. The rent will be paid directly to the landlord. You will never see the cash. The trust will also provide a monthly stipend for groceries and utilities calculated based on the average cost of living for a single person. It is enough to survive, Maya. It is enough to eat. It is enough to be warm. But, she stammered, but my car, the club, the debts. There is no car, I said sharply. There is no club, and the debts are yours. The trust has one condition. To receive the housing allowance, you must maintain full-time employment. I don't care if it is at a library, a store, or scrubbing floors like your mother did. You have to work. You have to earn your place in this world. Work, she whispered, as if it were a dirty word. But Dad, I haven't worked in 10 years. I can't. You can. And you will, I said, stepping closer. You are 35 years old, Maya. You are healthy, you are educated, and you are going to learn the lesson that I failed to teach you earlier. You are going to learn the value of a dollar earned with sweat. You're going to learn what it feels like to be invisible, to be the help. But the inheritance, she cried. The millions. Mom represents money. That money is gone. I lied. It wasn't gone. But for her it was. I transferred the bulk of the estate to a charitable foundation this afternoon, the Beatrice Thorne Scholarship Fund. It will help children of cleaning ladies and warehouse workers go to college. It will help people who know the value of sacrifice. You are not in the will. Maya, you are not a beneficiary. You are on your own. She stared at me, stunned, shattered. The reality of her new life was crashing down on her. No drivers, no parties, no safety net. Just a small apartment and a job application. "This is cruel," she hissed, finding a spark of anger in her desperation. "This is vindictive. You are doing this to punish me." "No," I said softly, feeling the tears finally prick my eyes. "I am doing this to save you. Punishment didn't work. Kindness didn't work. Maybe reality will. I am not feeding your ingratitude anymore, Maya. I am not financing the arrogance that allowed you to treat me like a dog. I love you enough to make sure you don't die on the street, but I love myself enough to make sure you never hurt me again." I pressed a button on the intercom. "Security, please escort Ms. Miller out." "Dad! No!" she screamed, scrambling to her feet, grabbing my arm. "Dad, please don't do this. I am sorry. I am so sorry." I gently removed her hand from my sleeve. My touch was firm. Final. "I know you are sorry," I said. "I am sorry too. I am sorry for the little girl I couldn't protect from her own greed. Now go, Maya. Go and find out who you really are when the money is gone." The elevator doors opened and the doorman stepped out, looking uncomfortable. "Ms. Miller," he said gently, "please, come with me." Maya looked at me one last time, her face a mask of ruin and disbelief. She waited for me to crack, to relent, to hand her a check. But I just stood there, a silhouette against the city lights, holding my ground. She turned and walked into the elevator, her shoulders slumped, her sobbing quiet and broken. When the doors closed, I was finally truly alone. I sat back down in the leather chair and let the tears fall. They weren't tears of regret. They were tears of mourning. I had buried my wife a month ago, but tonight I had buried my daughter. I picked up the picture of Beatrice from the side table, touching her face behind the glass. "I did it, Bay," I whispered to the empty room. "I broke the cycle. It hurts. God, it hurts. But she will learn. Or she won't. But either way, she won't break us again." I sat there in the dark, watching the city breathe, feeling the weight of the millions I controlled, and knowing that the only thing of value I had left was my integrity. And that was enough. The week after, Gavin went to prison, and Maya was escorted out of the penthouse. Was the longest week of my life. It was not long because of suffering, but because of the sheer volume of decisions that had to be made. Thaddeus and I sat in that high tower surrounded by bankers and lawyers, men who used to look right through me but who now hung on my every word, awaiting my command regarding the fate of the Hudson Project and the assets of the Miller estate. They expected me to be angry. They expected me to be vindictive. They expected me to hoard the gold like a dragon sitting on a mountain. But they did not know Elijah Thorne, and they certainly did not know Beatrice. The first thing I did was buy back the house at 42 Oak Street. The transaction was simple, a mere formality, since the previous sale had been fraudulent, but walking back through that front door was the hardest thing I have ever done. The air inside was stale, smelling of drywall dust and abandonment. Gavin represents contractors had started their demolition work before the arrest, tearing out the kitchen cabinets, ripping up the carpet in the living room, exposing the subfloor. It looked like a bomb had gone off. The walls where we had marked Maya represents height were gone. The fireplace where we hung our stockings was chipped and broken. I stood in the center of the living room, leaning on my cane, listening to the ghosts. Gavin had wanted to erase this place. He had called it a teardown, a dump. But as I looked at the exposed beams, the sturdy oak frame that I had helped reinforce 40 years ago, I realized that the house was just like me. It was battered, it was scarred, but the foundation was unbreakable. Thaddeus walked in behind me, kicking a piece of debris with his polished shoe. "What do you want to do with it, Elijah?" he asked. "Do you want to restore it? You have the money now. We can hire the best architects in the city. We can turn this into a palace." I shook my head slowly. No. Thaddeus, I don't want to live here. Too many memories, some good, some bad. But mostly I don't want to live in a museum of my past life. I have changed, and this house needs to change too. I walked over to the window looking out at the street where I had walked in the rain that night. I thought about the men I had worked with in the warehouse, men who had served in Vietnam, men who had come home with shrapnel in their bodies and nightmares in their heads, only to find that the country they fought for didn't have a place for them. I thought about the veterans I saw sleeping under the bridge downtown, men with medals in their pockets and nothing in their stomachs. I want to fix it, I said, turning to Thaddeus. But not for me. I want you to hire a crew, a local crew. Thaddeus, men from the neighborhood. I want this place renovated top to bottom, 6 bedrooms, a communal kitchen, a therapy room, and I want a ramp out front, a big solid ramp. Thaddeus raised an eyebrow. You are turning it into a boarding house. I smiled. No, I am turning it into a sanctuary. I am deeding this property to the Veterans Association specifically for elderly vets who have fallen on hard times, men like me who have bad legs and no family. Men who need a place where they are not treated like a burden but like heroes. I want this house to be full of laughter again, Thaddeus. I want it to smell of coffee and bacon and brotherhood. Gavin wanted to tear it down to build a monument to his ego. I am going to build a monument to dignity. Thaddeus nodded, pulling out his notepad, making a note. Consider it done. The Thorn Residence for Veterans. It has a nice ring to it. We left the house and drove to the bank, the same bank where Gavin had thrown the passbook in the trash. The manager, Mr. Henderson, greeted us at the door, not with fear this time, but with a wide, genuine smile. We went into the conference room where a team of accountants was waiting. They had finished the audit of the blind trust. The final number was staggering. It was more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, Mr. Thorne, the lead. Accountant said we have structured a diversified portfolio for you. If we keep the investments in low-risk bonds, you can live off the interest comfortably for the rest of your life and still leave a massive inheritance for whomever you choose. I looked at the spreadsheet at the rows of zeros. Beatrice had scrubbed floors for 50 years to build this. She had endured invisible indignities so that we would never be poor. And now I was rich. But wealth without purpose is just another kind of poverty. I don't want to just live comfortably, I said, standing up. I walked to the whiteboard at the front of the room, picking up a marker. Beatrice didn't save this money so I could buy yachts or join country clubs. She saved it because she knew how hard it was to start with nothing. She knew that for people like us, people with brown skin and calloused hands, the starting line is always 10 miles behind everyone else. I wrote a name on the board in big block letters. The Beatrice Thorne Foundation. I want 50% of the liquid assets transferred into this fund immediately, I said. The accountants gasped, exchanging worried glances. 50%. Sir, that is millions. I know what it is, I snapped. I earned it. Or rather, she earned it. And here is what we are going to do with it. We are establishing a scholarship fund, but not for the valedictorians, not for the kids with the perfect grades who already get all the offers. This fund is for the C students, the kids who have to work 2 jobs after school to help their mamas pay rent. The kids who fall asleep in class because they were working the night shift at the warehouse. I looked at Thaddeus, who was smiling softly. He knew exactly where I was going. I want this money to go to trade schools, I continued. I want to pay for electricians, plumbers, carpenters, nurses, the people who build this city, the people who clean it, the people who make it run. I want to pay for their tuition, their books and their tools, and I want every single check to come with a letter telling them the story of Beatrice Thorne, the cleaning lady who owned the skyline. The room was silent. I could see the shift in their eyes. They were no longer looking at a client. They were looking at a legacy. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, visibly moved. We will set it up immediately, Mr. Thorne. It will be an honor. And one more thing, I added, pulling a small plastic card from my pocket. It was my old union card from the logistics warehouse. I want a special grant for the children of the workers at the Apex warehouse. The men who helped me restrain Gavin. The men like Big Mike and Sal. Their kids go to college for free. Full ride. No questions asked. That is the severance package Gavin should have given them. When we left the bank, the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light over the city. I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of the secret was gone. The weight of the vengeance was gone. All that was left was the peace of a job well done. But there was one last stop I had to make. One last person I had to tell. Thaddeus drove me to the cemetery on the outskirts of the city. It was a quiet place, rolling green hills dotted with simple stones. Beatrice was buried under an old oak tree near the top of the hill. Looking back toward the skyline she had secretly owned, I asked Thaddeus to wait in the car. This was a conversation for just the two of us. I walked up the grassy slope, my leg feeling strong, my cane just an accessory now. The air was crisp and smelled of damp earth and falling leaves. I reached the grave and stood there for a long moment looking at the headstone. Beatrice Thorne, beloved wife, quiet strength. I sat down on the grass, not caring about the dirt on my expensive suit. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the passbook, the blue book with the taped spine that had started it all. I had taken it to a print shop earlier that day and had it laminated, sealed in heavy plastic to protect it from the rain, to protect it from time. I placed the book on the grass, leaning it against her stone. "Hey, Bee," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "You were right. You were right about everything. You told me once that the truth is like a river. It always finds a way to the ocean. Well, the river flooded, Bee. It washed everything away." I touched the cold granite, tracing her name with my finger. "We got him. Bee. Gavin is gone. He is in a cell where he can't hurt anyone ever again. And Maya... Well, Maya is going to have to learn to be a woman the hard way. The way you had to learn." I cut her off, Bee. "I had to. It broke my heart, but I had to do it to save her soul. She is going to work. She is going to struggle. But maybe, just maybe, she will find the strength you had." A breeze rustled the leaves of the oak tree, sounding like a sigh. I looked out at the city, at the lights flickering on in the skyscrapers. I gave the money away. "Bee," I told her, "I kept enough for me, enough to be safe. But the rest, it is going to the kids. It is going to the kids who look like us, the kids who are invisible. They are going to know your name. They are going to know that a black woman with a mop and a bucket changed the world." I felt a tear run down my cheek, hot and cleansing. I let it fall. "And the house," I continued. "It is going to be full of soldiers, Bee men who need a home. I think you would like that. You always did have a soft spot for strays." I stayed there for a long time, watching the stars come out. I felt her presence there in the wind, in the quiet, in the beat of my own heart. She wasn't gone. She was in the concrete of the buildings she owned. She was in the future of the students. She would help. And she was in the spine of the husband she had saved. I stood up, brushing the grass from my knees. I looked at the passbook one last time, gleaming in the moonlight. "You won, Bee," I said softly. "We taught them a lesson they will never forget. The junk in the trash turned out to be the treasure, and the old man in the basement turned out to be the king." I turned and walked back down the hill toward the waiting car. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I carried her with me. I got into the car, and Thaddeus looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Where to?" "Elijah," he asked. I looked at the road ahead, stretching out into the night, endless and full of possibility. "Let is go get a steak." "Thaddeus," I said, "a big one, and then take me home. Not to the old house, to the new one. I have a lot of work to do, and I am just getting started." The morning sun hits the trellis in my new garden at exactly 7 o'clock, painting the roses in shades of gold and crimson that remind me of the lipstick Beatrice used to wear on Sundays. I sit here on a bench made of sturdy teak, gripping a mug of hot coffee, and I listen not to the sirens of the city or the screaming of greedy men, but to the sound of wind chimes dancing in the breeze. It has been 6 months since the doors of the federal courthouse closed behind Gavin Miller, and 6 months since my daughter Maya walked out of the elevator and into the reality of a working-class life. People ask me if I am lonely living in this smaller house near the lake. It is not a mansion. It does not have a ballroom or a wine cellar. It has a good kitchen, a comfortable chair, and a garden. The answer is no. I am not lonely. Loneliness is living in a house full of people who don't see you. Solitude, on the other hand, is living with yourself and liking the company. I have my books. I have my health, which is improving every day, thanks to the best doctors money can buy. And I have my visits to the Thorne residence for veterans. I drove past there yesterday. The old house on Oak Street looks different now. The ramp is finished wide and welcoming. The windows are open, and I could hear the sound of a baseball game on the radio drifting out onto the porch. 3 men were sitting there. Men who looked like I used to look, tired, worn down by a world that had used them up, but they were smiling. They were drinking iced tea and arguing about the score. Seeing them there in the house Beatrice and I built fills a hole in my heart that I didn't know existed. Gavin wanted to tear those walls down to build a monument to his vanity. Instead, those walls are now sheltering men who actually know what honor means. As for Maya, Thaddeus brings me a report once a month. She is working as a receptionist at a dental clinic downtown. It is not a glamorous job. She takes the bus. She lives in a small apartment where the radiator clanks in the winter. The report says she looks tired. It says she has stopped buying designer clothes because she has to pay for electricity. It says she cries sometimes in the break room. Reading that is hard. It is the hardest thing I have ever had to do. But then I read the last line of the report. It says she called her aunt last week not to ask for money but just to talk. It says she adopted a stray cat. I fold the report and put it away. Punishing her was never the goal. Waking her up was. And maybe she is finally opening her eyes. I often think about the secrets we keep. Beatrice kept the biggest secret of all, not to deceive me, but to protect me. She knew that money changes people. It acts like a magnifying glass, revealing who they really are inside. For Gavin, money was a drug that amplified his greed and his cruelty. For Maya, it was a shield that hid her insecurity. For me, it is a tool. Nothing more and nothing less. It is a hammer to build a school, a key to open a door for a veteran, and a blanket to keep the cold away. But it is not who I am. I am still. Elijah, the man who knows the price of milk, the man who respects the person who sweeps the floor just as much as the person who owns the building. I want to ask you something, friend. As we come to the end of this story, and I want you to be honest with me in the comments below, how much do you really know about the people you live with? If the money ran out tomorrow, if the house was gone, would your family still be standing, or would they turn on each other like wolves? And for the parents listening, do your children respect you for who you are, or do they only respect what you can give them? It is a scary question, I know, but it is better to ask it now than to find out the answer when you are 72 years old standing in the rain. And there is another question, a financial one. Do you think I was right to hide the truth for so long? Or rather, was Beatrice right? In this age of social media where everyone flashes their wealth, where everyone wants to look like a king, should we be moving in silence? Is privacy the ultimate luxury, telling nobody what you have until it is time to use it to protect yourself? I read every single comment you write, and I learned from you just as I hope you have learned from me. This journey hasn't just been about revenge. Revenge is a fire that burns out quickly, leaving only ash. This has been about justice, and justice is a slow, steady river. It carves through the hardest rock. Given enough time, I didn't set out to destroy my family. I set out to save my dignity, and in doing so, I saved a legacy that was almost thrown into the garbage. Beatrice used to say that the loudest person in the room is usually the weakest. The strong ones don't need to shout. Gavin shouted, Maya shouted. But in the end, the quiet cleaning lady and the crippled warehouse worker were the ones left standing. So take a look at your life. Take a look at the quiet people around you, the ones you might have overlooked, the ones you might have underestimated. You never know which one of them is holding the passbook that holds the keys to the kingdom. We often judge wealth by the clothes someone wears or the car they drive, but true power is silent. My wife Beatrice taught me that dignity isn't something you buy, it is something you build, brick by brick in the shadows where no one is watching. Gavin and Maya made the fatal mistake of confusing kindness with weakness and silence with ignorance. They thought they could throw away a lifetime of sacrifice like yesterday is trash. But in the end, the junk they discarded was the very anchor that could have saved them. Never underestimate the people who built the ground you stand on. If this story made you think, if it made you want to call your parents or check your own financial walls, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, someone who might be struggling with a Gavin or a Maya in their own life. Let us build a community here, a place where wisdom is shared and where we remind each other that it is never too late to stand up for yourself. I am Elijah Thorne, and thank you for listening to My Truth. I will see you in the comments, and until next time, remember to walk tall, even if you have to use a cane.